There's one thing you can do if you don't want next year to repeat what happened to you in 2025, and that is to change the way you plan for goals and execute on them. Today, we're going to break down how to make 2026 your best year yet. How do you set your goals so you actually achieve them this year? I'm going to give you guys my step-by-step process that I've been doing for 15 years so you can steal my homework. Because like T.S. Eliot said, only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far they can go. I always think about this line that Dave Chappelle said, at any given moment, the one with the bigger dream wins. And then he talked about this story where he always tries to control the dream. And he said, I am a very powerful dreamer. But I think the trick to that is you actually got to know what you want. Otherwise, you will be in somebody else's dream. And so this big goal that you have today, if you don't take the right steps to hit it, you will never have the life that you want. You will be living in a series of like maybes, potentiallys, could-haves, should-haves, and never actually achieved. But my goal is that you steal my homework today and you don't live anywhere near that. There's a couple concepts I want you to steal today. One I call the goal gravity. So this is the force that pulls everything in your business and life towards whatever your target is, because your goal actually means nothing if your habits stay the same. And so you can't have, first of all, small goals. Like T.S. Eliot said, you need a big goal because that allows your priorities to sharpen and allows you, even if you miss, and you probably will, you land somewhere you couldn't have reached playing it small. So I want you to think about your goal as this big, huge planet that's just pulling all of these things to it because the gravitational pull is so dramatic. If you want to achieve something really tiny, you're never going to have the gravity to do it. So write down a goal, but make it fucking big. That's one. Then a lot of times I realize you have to actually change your mindset to hit that goal, that it's actually scary to write down those big, huge, over-the-top things that most people will tell you you will never be able to achieve. And so the fork in the road is that most people never go big and they do what I call exploitation instead of exploration. So exploitation is when you just kind of keep repeating what already works. You iterate a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better until your life kind of looks like everybody else's because you've never done something really, really big. You've just exploited the status quo. Exploration is you only obsess on what might work that you've never done before. You explore the unexplored. Both have utility, but the catch is exploitation just gets you efficiency, a little bit better. Exploration is where you get breakthroughs. And so right now, almost everything, schools, jobs, nudge us towards being better exploiters, right? Like memorize the right answer, optimize for what's worked before, don't question the playbook, definitely don't risk looking dumb. And so they're trying to get you to refine, but not rethink. And that's okay until you realize your whole business or life is built on habits you stopped questioning years ago. And right now, I think the world is full of exploiters. And so we have to get you to actually become one of the few explorers if you want to live a life that most people will only ever dream of. And this is the time to do it right now, towards the end of the year. So I thought I'd tell you how I set my huge goals. And then I'm going to give you tricks from the biggest goal setters in the world that I have learned and implemented in my life. And it kind of starts with this 5-step process. So I've done this for, 15 years now. Step 1, I have learned to use the words impossible with the greatest caution. This is actually von Braun who said that. And I like to steal for my first step this idea from Jeff Bezos, which is called regret minimization. And how do you do that? So regret minimization means that Bezos didn't set annual goals early on. He set irreversible direction goals. So what does that mean? In 1994, he used what became known as this framework I'm going to tell you. And he said, every time he thinks about a goal, he asks himself, when I am 80, will I regret not trying this? His goal wasn't, I want to make $1 million. I want to build a company. I want to do a startup. It was, I want to build the world's most customer-centric company in the world. I want to be the fittest person ever at 40. Something that at 80 you will regret if you do not try. That makes everything else sort of a branch on a tree. Right? So your first question in goal setting is like, what will you regret? Not what do you want, but what will your soul scream at you for not having tried? The second thing I do is I say every year has a name. So if you go back through my actual goal journal every year, I name my year first because I think names are really powerful. And if you name it, you can frame it. And if you frame it, then you can actually achieve it. And so, for instance, I wrote down some of them for you, and I'll show you what it looks like here. 2024, I called my full send year. And after I write a name for my year, I write a sentence on it, which is what I think you should do next. So that year for me, it was the year I fully send it on being myself, taking big swings, on periods of sprints and rests, and doing it my way with joy and fun and brilliance. So what is your year? In 2025, this year was the year of flow. And that was more of what we want, less of what we don't. So in the past, I had written down, these were my words. It's kind of fun to look at them today. In the past, I had listened to too many others. I'd done all the work myself. I hadn't given the hard feedback in the moment. I'd been the one pushed and shepherding everyone. And this year I said no more. Now I am the one who gets to receive and have others push for me. I'm no longer at a fight or flight and instead able to conduct the orchestra without playing every instrument. So 2025 was my year of pros and flow. And you saw that probably in my business. I hired a bunch of pros to do things that I was doing every single aspect of it before, and it was feeling like a little bit too much. The year before that, I was okay with it. I needed to do it all because I was fully sending it. So this year for you, what is your year? Name it. Tell us in the comments. What is one sentence example of how you want to see that year for you? Then I like to steal this idea from Elon Musk for my third one. He calls it first principles and backwards timelines. So here's how he sets his goals. Musk starts with what physics says is possible, not what society believes. And I love this. I say to my company right now too, somebody will come to me and they'll say, hey, we can't do X, Y, Z. And I'll say, hold on. I hate that word can't, by the way. Be careful if you ever say can't to yourself. And I'll say, by can't, do you mean, is it physically impossible, aka against the laws of physics? Is it illegal to do it, aka you'd go to jail? Or is it contractually obligated? You don't do it? Otherwise, that's just a preference or a resource issue. Can't only means it's illegal, it's physically impossible, or it is against some sort of contractual terms we have written down in ink or blood. And if it is not those three things, then can't's not the right word. Choosing not to could be the right word, but it's not can't. And so Musk starts with physics. That is first principle. Then he sets a target outcome. So he would say that reverse engineers every dependency, backward to present. Meaning, if he says, I want to take a rocket to go to the moon, I want to make life multi-planetary, as he would say, then he would map, okay, I need rockets. Then I might need reusable ones because it'd be way too expensive if we're not reusing them. I need to land that rocket if I want to reuse it, which means that I need to cut costs, which means that I need to manufacture these bad things, which means I need this much capital or money. So he turned the biggest goal, multiplanetary, into the first constraint. Now, how do you do this for you? I would do the same thing. First principles. Let's say it's, I want to make $1 million this year. I would say, okay, maybe that's big enough. Maybe it's not. But first principles, I want to free my family financially from ever having to work again. Maybe that's $1 million. Maybe that's 10 million. Okay, now work backwards. Well, how much money do I need? How much money do I spend? What is my skill stack? How long would it take me to get there? Could I do it faster? What mechanisms are real to get there? Instead of just telling me what you want, why don't you tell me what is the path to get the thing that you want? Then I'm going to make you tell me, what are you willing to sacrifice to get it? Here's the truth about owning a business. You work hard to build something real, but without the right insurance, one accident or mistake can cost you weeks of headaches, lost revenue, and sleepless nights. Next Insurance gives small business owners instant online coverage so you can protect what you've built. No long forms, no overpriced policies, no waiting around. Just fast, simple protection designed for your business. Policies start at $29 a month, and you get an instant certificate of insurance so you can win bigger contracts and operate like a true pro. So whether you're a creator, contractor, consultant, or Main Street operator, Next keeps you covered because risk comes with ownership, but getting protected shouldn't be one of them. Check out nextinsurance.com/Codie and protect what you've built today. And so let's talk about how I do these goals in my life. I like to categorize them. I'm not so unidirectional as Elon Musk, where I'm like multiplanetary or die. I have a couple that are important to me. My first one is always my relationship. So this is literally what some of mine were last year. It was, we're happy and we argue well. think it's ridiculous to think you're not going to argue. Just learn to argue fairly. Walk. I want to go on a walk every day together. I think that's like a beautiful moment that we have. I want to have, quote unquote, our version of work-life balance, which means we live in Austin for most of the year and we have a house by the water and we can go there in aggregate for 2 to 3 months a year. Then work. That's the second most important to me after my relationship. That means I want to hit a certain revenue target. It means this podcast, I wanted that to become a top 50 podcast in the world. By the way, we did it. I wanted to have a best-selling book. I literally wrote down a book that is a New York Times bestseller and I sell 1 million copies and have a sold-out launch date in person with 200K people signed up. And you know what else happened? We fucking did it. And so you write them down and it's fun to go look back and see what you did or didn't. Travel. I said, I want to live somewhere with a view of the ocean for 1 to 3 months. I did that in aggregate. I wanted to go on a bucket list trip. We did. We went Nicaragua surfing. I wanted to tour around the country, create a movement. We did that with Main Street Millionaire. And then I think you should have some fun in life. So my last category is fun. And so for me, that might be some silly things even. I wanted to feel more sexy and feminine. Look at the shoulder. See, look at that. Fucking nailing it. I wanted to play with makeup and hair. I'd actually never cared about any of this stuff, but I thought I was like maybe becoming a bit too masculine. So I thought, let's get back into this feminine nature. I wanted to be sleeping really well and wake up happy and refreshed and not anxious and thrilled with my life, which means that I drink less now because red wine makes me crazy. I don't know about you guys. Tell me in the comments. I fucking love it, but I don't sleep well. And then I really wanted to focus on my enjoying the journey. I don't know if you ever feel like you've achieved some of the things you want in life, but you don't enjoy the journey to achievement. I didn't like that. So I was like, I want to be really happy. I want to feel like I have so much to accomplish, but I'm enjoying it and thankful for it. Okay. So now you've got your buckets. I like having 3 to 5. That's all I allow. The next thing though, you got to figure out what are the things you want to say no to. Say no to the things that aren't a fuck yes. That was really big for me. And so my say no list included like things I wouldn't do with my mindset and things I wouldn't do with my health, which comes back to health being no more alcohol. I didn't nail that one, you guys. I didn't nail it. If you follow me on the internet, you probably know that. I said I wanted to do hard 75 again. Also did not nail that. And then I wanted no more bread or processed food. And that, my friends, that's the tragedy. That has absolutely not been accomplished. So, okay, didn't nail all my goals last year, but I nailed more of them than I did before. Then I write a more of, less of list. What does this mean? Well, every year I want to talk about the things that I loved that I did and the things that I wish I would like a little bit of less of that. And so Warren Buffett kind of famously did this another way. He called it the anti-goal method. So how he sets goals is he uses a 5-25 rule, which is he would say to you, write 25 long-term goals, circle the top 5 of yours, and avoid the other 20 at all costs. And he believes that more goals equal more failure. And I love this story. He was talking about his pilot. And his pilot was saying all these things that he wanted to accomplish this year. And Buffett had him do this. He said, write down these 25, circle the top 5. And he was saying, okay, well, how are you going to choose which one of these to do next? And the pilot said, well, I'm going to do this one, this one, this one. And he just took a big pen and just X'd out all 20 of his goals that weren't in the top 5 and said, if you're actually serious about the top 5, you have to be completely relentless of cutting the bottom 20. This is called ruthless focus. So every year I write a list of things I want more of in the year and a list of things that I want less of. Because the truth of the matter is you can't keep adding always. The world requires subtraction. This last year, some of mine were less respect seeking. You try to get people to respect you who you honestly don't respect at all. You get upset when somebody belittles your accomplishment. Silly. Partnership deals. I wanted less of those this year. Like last year, I did really, really 2 bad partnership deals that cost me 7 figures and time. And I was like, I am so tired of being a workhorse for somebody else's reward. So no new friends if they want partnerships. And then chosen struggle. Like, do you ever feel like you get off on hard things being the way? This year I was like, no, I'm going to see what it's like to paddle with, not against the current. So those are my less of. What are yours? Then my more of. It's like, I want to be more feminine. I want to take big swings. I really focused on the fact that I was going to try a few more big swings and sprints and then rests. And then fun. I talk a lot about serious things, money, ownership, saving our country. But I want to focus on the fact that we can have fun while we're doing it. And so like some small things here, even at the company this week, we had this big event, we had top tier attendance. And so I was like, how about a Tendy Award? Well, really, Chris came up with the Tendy Award because we all know my husband's funnier than I am. And he's like, let's get 200 chicken tendies for the guy who drove attendance more than anybody else. And we'll give him the annual Tendy Award. And I was like, that's hysterical. Let's do that. So I want you to think about, what is your year going to be? Now, one of the final questions becomes, how do you actually follow through on these? Because your life is going to be your daily actions multiplied and compounded. And so a long time ago, I read a book by Sam Walton, the creator of Walmart. It's an incredible book. And he talks about obsessively measurable daily goals. And so how he sets his goals. Well, I think you guys have your big goals already. Now you have your more of less of list. And instead of setting like a bunch of corporate objectives, Walton would set daily numeric targets that everybody could see. So for his company, that might have been like sales per square foot, inventory turnover, store growth, shrinkage reduction. He believes everything improves when everyone knows the score. I think that's the same in business and in life. So the question for you is, what are you tracking every day to make sure that you actually know the scoreboard? And one of the ways I do this that I'll show you right now, I use an app called Streaks. I'm not affiliated with it, but I should be because I use it all the time. And basically this app shows you kind of like each day if you hit your streak or not on the small things you care about. And so on here, it's like workout for me, probiotic, sauna, sun, focus on something to do with revenue, blah, blah, blah. You can have one just like this. He told this story that I loved. If you haven't read the book, it's super good. But Walton would basically talk about how he drove 100,000 miles a year with one goal: to visit the stores and ask managers, what is your goal today? Not this quarter, today. And then he would ask them often if they hit it. How do they know if they were going to hit their goals or not? So today, go follow my little chart for you, because I know that if you obsess on the thing you want every single day, you're more likely to get it. And so let's talk about some patterns here. What have I seen from the greatest people in the world about setting goals? There's really only 5 patterns, and if you hit them, you will achieve your goals more often. Pattern 1, they set far fewer goals than normal people. 2 or 3 directional goals, thousands of executive decisions continuously over time. Pattern 2, their goals are binary, not incremental. So make life multiplanetary, dominate microprocessors, become the most customer-obsessed company on earth, become a mom, find a husband, grow your business. Binary goals. They are qualitative in some ways, but they lead to massive quantitative outcomes. They will change the trajectory of your life. Pattern 3, they all use time horizons that scare normal people. Bezos famously talked about 7-year flywheels. Gates is known as a multi-decade architect. Walton, he did daily execution, but on decades-long wins. And then Musk does 20 to 50-year targets. Pattern 4, they don't confuse goals with tasks. So they set direction and then build systems. And 5, they document and they track, because what gets measured gets managed, just like Peter Drucker says. The great thing for you guys to know this year, it takes 21 days to create a habit, but I think it takes 90 days to create a totally different lifestyle. Start your timer. It is now day 1.
You are not meant to stay in minimum wage.
A study showed that job hopping beat inflation for 49% of job hoppers.
We shouldn't be trying to raise the minimum wage. We should be trying to get people out of minimum wage jobs.
Have you ever had an HR experience?
Bad bosses are the #1 reason there are great entrepreneurs. A lot of people don't know how to quit. They don't know the right way to quit. They don't know how to ask for more money. They don't know how to move on to the next thing.
Bring the band in.
Hey, it's the Big Deal Podcast, and I'm Codie Sanchez. For those who don't just want to be rich, but free and do what it actually takes to get there. Okay, today we got 3 good things for you. First of all, what to do if you're miserable and you hate your job. 2, why corporations and institutions are something we don't trust very much anymore when it comes to jobs. 3, what can you do about it? We're going to break that down in all its detail today, so hang out with us. I want to share a quick business tip that I've been thinking a lot about lately. It's eliminate, automate, delegate. So if you do tasks in that order in your business, it runs more smoothly. I'm always looking for tools to help eliminate tasks, then automate them, and then finally delegate those that are absolutely necessary. One of those tools is Riverside. Not only can it record 4K video and audio remotely to make sure your podcast quality is top notch, but it's also drastically improved my team's editing speed with the text-based editor. Transcribes your footage, removes silences in one click, and creates these short clips just by selecting the text. Even better, if you make a mistake, which we try not to do, you can delete the sentence and the transcript will delete it from your video instantly. So Riverside has an in-platform editor where you can upload your own content too. So it's not just footage recorded on Riverside that gets the special treatment. So how do people find new podcasts? Often from seeing clips, right? You see a bunch of mine. Riverside gets this, and that's why I like their AI Magic Clips. Analyzes moments in your podcast that have the most potential to get traction online. That saves hours of listening to your podcast for the 5th time to find the perfect clip. Riverside's got you covered. We're always trying to remove, automate, not add, and complicate. But don't waste your time doing what Riverside can do for you. I got you guys a deal. If you want to try it for yourself, get the Riverside link in the description and use the code Cody for an exclusive discount just for y'all. Our contrarian idea of the day is basically this, that young people these days all seem to hate their jobs and not like what they're doing, and do videos like this on the internet, which you guys might have seen, which went super viral. A 21-year-old with a TikTok video that has been taken down because she got all this backlash. Everybody's talking about it. I want you guys to hear a part of it. And instead of bashing on this young woman because it sucks to be young in your 20s and broke, let's talk about what to do about this. All right, here we go.
I know I'm probably just being so dramatic and annoying, but this is my first job, like my first 9-to-5 job after college, and I'm in person, and I'm commuting in the city, and it takes me forever to get there. There's no way I'm gonna be able to afford living in the city right now, so that's off the table. Like, duh! If I was able to walk to work, and it'd be fine, but I'm not. So it literally takes me, like, I leave here, like, I get on the train at 7:30, and I don't get home till, like, 6:15 earliest, and then, like, I don't have time to do anything. I want to shower, eat my dinner, and go to sleep. I don't have time or energy to cook my dinner either. Like, I don't have energy to work out. Like, that's out the window. Like, I'm so upset.
Dude, I feel that. Rachel, you live in New York. I bet
I do.
feel some of this.
I don't work a corporate job. What are your thoughts on this, honestly?
Well, I guess this is what I kind of would say if you were young, lost, and broke. I realized the other day that I wish somebody had said to young me when this was going down that there's some truth that nobody really tells you, which is that the second that you leave school, you turn into an adult and you realize what that actually means. And on average, you get a challenging white-collar college grad job. You're going to work 8 to 10 hours a day. You'll finish and be tired and stressed. You'll just want a glass of booze or weed and food and Netflix to dull it all. But then you'll find out, like, your fridge is empty. So you got to go to the grocery store. You'll go from fluorescent lights at work to fluorescent lights and banging carts to mindlessly wandering around because, I don't know, you can't even remember the right aisle for pasta. But then you find it, and then there's like 1,500 options except the one you want. So whatever, you like grab the fucking bag and you walk like cattle through a grate. And then the checkout line is, of course, so long, which is dumb because it's rush hour and basically the same every single week. So they should know the difference. But like, you remember that it's not the checkout lady's fault. So you kind of fake smile at each other because the only thing more tedious and monotonous than your life right now is probably hers. But you got the food. So then you lug the groceries 10 blocks back to your house. The plastic is flimsied, so it's digging into your fingers, and the wine is punishing you with its weight before you even get to drink it. And then finally you get home. You eat your pasta by yourself, but you rush, so it's still kind of hard. And then you drink enough wine until you can crawl into bed for another day of the same monotony while you wonder if this will be the entirety of your existence. That is what they don't tell you about your first job. Is that it won't actually crush you with the difficulty. It'll crush you with the banality and torturous meaninglessness of it all. Because you don't get the right to earn to start. And even worse, you don't get the right to challenging problems. And this is the truth. And the only silver lining is that if you get through this all, the eye-numbing boredom, and you prove that you are not just okay, but great, you will eventually get to do things you love and make more money than you ever imagined. However, it will feel kind of like slowly pulling off your fingernails one by one at first, and there is no other way. But the adults should have told you that. They should have told this young woman that, because many of them are still stuck in the cycle and too terrified to admit it and unwilling to look your disappointment in the eye to tell you kind of the truth. So you don't need to ask them if they're happy or not. You can see it on their faces. And I think that's what I realized, that young people kind of say we hate it here. But that's because they don't actually understand what here is and how long they have to be here. Your first job, it's like the DMV. It's shitty. Nothing makes sense. It's not efficient. You don't know what you're doing. They take an awful picture of you. They make you use it as a license. It takes way longer than you think to get out of there, but you're not supposed to stay there. And that's why you can handle the DMV. It's a hell, but it's temporary. I guess that's my long rant on what somebody should have told this young woman and what somebody should tell all of us about our first job. It sucks. Expect it. Adults who don't tell you that are lying to you because they are stuck in it and they know it. And it'll be okay because there's a way out afterwards. I obviously have no strong feelings on this whatsoever.
Obviously, none at all. On that, let's get into the idea of the week.
Yeah, what is the idea of the week this week?
You have to leave your job or you will make less money, except if you do this. A study showed that job hopping beat inflation for 49% of job hoppers based on a Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta report. For those that stayed, only 42% got inflation-beating raises. So you are basically losing the game if you stayed in your role. So inflation is like 2 to 3% per year, right? So if you're a high performer, you could be seeing like 7 to 12% as a raise. That would be awesome. Like that would be so sick. But if you're not seeing like at least a raise, that's 2 to 3%, inflation's beating you. So you're literally losing money by staying in that job. Yeah. So on that, how much job hopping should we actually be doing?
You are not meant to stay in minimum wage, for instance. Like everybody wants to raise the minimum wage, and I think that's lying to us about what actually matters. We shouldn't be trying to raise the minimum wage. We should be trying to get people out of minimum wage jobs. That should be a stepping stone to a higher level job, and we should have more advancement in our careers as opposed to stagnation and expecting the stagnant levels of learning to stay at the same price or payment. I think job hopping is totally fine, but it shouldn't be lateral. So lots of different ways for you to jump a job. You can jump a job from side to side. You could jump a job from up and down. And you want to make sure that as often as possible, you're jumping from down to up. And so if you look at my career, I think I stayed a year and a half on average for my first 3 jobs. I stayed that long because I pressed and asked for a raise at each job for performance. By the way, this doesn't work if you suck. You know, if you suck, you don't know if your performance is actually driving revenue to the company. You're not in, let's call it the top, 40% of people that do the same job as you. You need to get better at the thing that you're doing right now as opposed to go try to negotiate for more. But if you are a top performer, then I think you need to be asking for a raise every year, maybe twice a year, depending on what you do. And then if you have no opportunity for you to make more money, that is when you jump. And that's what I did in every single job. So I jumped for cash and then I jumped for title. And the reason jumping for title is interesting is because if you right now, in finance, this is how it was, but it could apply to lots of different companies. So say you come in as an analyst, which is the lowest level. An analyst has what's called a pay range, right? So they're only really allowed to pay analysts within this band. And so if you want to get the next level of payment, you really got to go to an associate level. So I wouldn't just leave to go be an analyst at Morgan Stanley to then go be an analyst at Merrill Lynch. I would jump from analyst to associate. And with that title change, typically what is the difference between one job and another when it comes to title? It's responsibilities. Mm-hmm. Asking for a higher title is really just saying, I am willing to do harder and more work. That's what that means. It's not that you've been there longer. It's not anything besides that. So those are the 2 things I would think about is if you can't get a raise, if you can't get a title jump, and you are a top performer, it's time to move.
You were talking about how you've been in roles for like a year and a half on average. What was that process like the actual approach to going to your employers and asking for a raise?
Negotiation one-on-one. If you guys want to make more money, learn how to negotiate. That's the name of the game. Chris Voss never split the difference. I think the best way to learn negotiation is by listening to him. There's really like 3 things you need to know if you want to negotiate a salary raise at your company. The first thing that you need to know is you need to know what your job is worth. So how do you decide what your job is worth? There's 2 ways to do that. The first way is to go and look at competitors from other companies and see what they're willing to pay. If you are a graphic designer at a company, go look out and in your sector and in your job responsibility and in your geography, how much do they pay another graphic designer at a company of similar size? You go to Indeed.com, you check out your competitive listings. Okay, great. Now you know. You're paid $67,000. The average is $70,000. You've got some ability to negotiate between the 2. The second way that you can determine how much you make is by figuring out how much revenue you drive to the company. How much value do you bring to the company? And that, I think, is the equation that most people do not have, where you don't realize what you make somebody for every hour that you spend inside of the company. So I would try to figure that out. So if you're a graphic designer at a company, I would try to figure out, well, do my graphic designs help sell ads? Do these graphic designs go in books, and what would they cost them to do it somewhere else? After you understand how much you make, understand what makes your boss look better or cooler. And I don't want to spend that much time on like salary raises, because for some reason, people just don't do it. I think there's something like 30% of people that will ever negotiate their salary on an annual basis. 70% of people just will never do it. You guys will never do it. I don't know why. You don't want to hear about it on the internet. It's the easiest way to make money is to make more money doing the current thing that you're already doing with one or two conversations. But for some reason, everybody wants to hear about side hustles as opposed to negotiating their salaries. And most people think that their bosses will not give them a raise. And I actually think it's the opposite. I think your boss will give you a raise. You just suck at asking for it because you don't know what you're worth, you don't know what the competitive landscape is, and you don't know what matters to your boss. But if you knew that your boss had a quota that he had to hit, or your boss has, revenue goals that they have to hit, and if you could help your boss hit that, your boss makes more money, then you could negotiate better. I'm sure in the comments, there's going to be 472 people going, that must be nice that you could do that, but I can't. I don't know why that is.
Have you ever had to negotiate before going into a role? So say you're doing one of those like lateral movements. Was there a way that you were able to make that actually move that was a step up by negotiating before you walk in the door? I feel like that's an area where people get really nervous because you're like, oh my gosh, what happens if this new hiree, a new employer says no?
If you want to make more money in negotiating a salary when you're jumping jobs, one of my favorite ways to do that is using what's called a shadow influence. And so a lot of times we don't want to be the bad guy, right? And so when you go to negotiate, you go, hey, I really would like to make $75,000, not 70. And they're like, okay, greedy. Or at least that's what you think in your mind. What's interesting is I instead would say something like this. My significant other and I will have to make some changes. We'll either have to move because of this. I'm going to have to do less work with him because of this. And so I've really sort of agreed upon the next role with him because I'm going to pour so much of myself into it. I need to make at least $75,000 for our next step as a couple. And so I've kind of gone back and forth with him on that. And so for that reason, I really need the $75,000. You'll find men do this all the time with their wives. Well, I've got to check with the wife. It's a brilliant move because you have a shadow balance, right? You can do the same thing. I've got to check with my partner. I've got to check with my significant other. I really can't spend time away from the kids for that amount. We've said as a family, we understand sacrifices for our family based on this amount. But anything less than that, I need to spend time with my kids. So I would use a shadow influence, really, really useful. And who can argue with you? They can't go to you and go, well, tell your boyfriend to go fuck off. That doesn't work, right? Tell your wife her opinion doesn't matter. So you've put yourself as the good guy, let me talk to the wife. Let me talk to the other guy. It's really smart. The second thing that I would do is you could negotiate something along the lines of, when I look out at the competitive landscape, I see that this role is worth X. And for my experience level, when I've spoken to other companies, they say my experience level is worth X. Now, I want to go with your company. I love what you guys do. You're my number one, no side pieces, just you. But I want to understand where the difference is between what I see the market is and what other people say my compensation is versus yours. Do you think that we could come up to that level since that's what it looks like market is? And that way I would feel really comfortable. I wouldn't even negotiate for something over what market is. Again, what are you doing? You're using a shadow influence, which is this is what the market says. I can't help it. This is what everybody else says. I can't help it. And at least that way you don't look greedy for no reason. You've got data to back up hard conversations.
Has anybody ever come to you and asked for a raise? And I want to hear about the first time that happened, because I feel like that would be kind of jarring. Somebody as a business owner yourself, somebody coming up to you being like, yeah, I don't feel like I'm getting paid enough. That must feel...
I don't think anybody does it well the first time. So just feel better about that. And it's always going to annoy your boss because what are you doing? You're just saying I want to take more money out of your pocket and put it into mine. And we're humans. And so that's how they're going to respond to you, at least physically. So as much as you can put yourself on their side of the table versus on the opposite side of the table is really key. How it's been done poorly is we had this one video editor that he had no idea what his job was worth. He had no idea what the market was. And he just threw out a wild number. He's like, I want to make this. And I was like, okay, cool. Why? And he's like, well, because that's what I think I'm worth. Why? Well, because, I think that that's what the job is. And it just like house of cards fell real quick, right? Now, that one kind of pissed me off because he wanted a crazy number. I think he wanted $200,000 to be a part-time editor for short form videos. And he was living in another country. And I was like, the thing is, you've watched a lot of my videos and I've told you to negotiate, but you forgot the original thing, which is you have to understand what your role is worth, and your role is just simply not worth that. And so that's point one. The second thing that can be, kind of tough when people have negotiated with me before, the worst thing that you can do, and think about this with your partner too, there's something called set and setting. So if you want to have a negotiation with your partner and you want to get what you want from your partner, should you ask your partner when he's coming home from work, he's beat up, he's like tired, it was a long day, he's like schlepping his bags in and out of the thing, and the second that he comes in the door, you're like, can you please take out the trash and like clean up? The house is a total mess. What do you think his reaction is going to be? He's going to be like, get the fuck out of here, get off me. I'm like, I just walked in the door, calm down. Yet this is really normal. We all do this to our partners. And so instead, you could have the exact same question, but if you set your setting more appropriately, you'll probably win. So if instead of doing that, when your person comes in, you go, honey, you have like a little cocktail for him. You maybe like come and give a big hug. You help him with his bags. You like set it down. You give him a kiss. You're like, I love you. Then give him like 20 minutes, get him to chill out, get him to sit on the couch. And what do? Set and settings. You're like, oh, you've got a whiskey. I've got a whiskey. We're both hanging out. Now you're more chill. Hey, you know what? Not right now, but like in the next like 20 or something, can we clean up around the house? It's a little bit chaotic in here. And like, would you mind taking out the trash? It's too heavy for me. And what do you think your likelihood of him saying yes is going to be? Way higher, right? And so it's the same thing with your boss. If you come in and your boss has just come out of a bunch of meetings and you've not scheduled it and you come in hard and it's after negative earnings report and you say like, I want to make this, your boss is immediately fight or flight, typically fight, and it's not going to go over well. Instead, you can do it the opposite. Wait until you're going to have some moment where you do something cool for your boss. So you're like, oh man, we just had an incredible launch. Look, the numbers are way up. Like, I'm so happy. Oh, we have this new hire. Bop, bop, bop. And then, you talk to them, you celebrate, and you go, given this, I'd really love to talk to you about potential to earn more on a go-forward basis. Would you be open to talking about how if I do X and Y and Z, I could potentially make this amount? And because you've set and setting, right, you might win.
So like the raise is out of the question. And the reason being is because your manager is just really unattentive. It's like the person watching you, like they are the problem and you can't grow in that space. You can't get the new role. How do you expect somebody to go about leaving their job then?
Well, I mean, I've done this 6 times. I've left jobs that didn't work. I'm corporate as they come. Most people on the internet are literally unemployable. Like they've never had a real job. They don't understand people who have jobs. They tell you guys every single day why you should just quit and go all in and it doesn't matter. And they've only ever been content creators. And it's always annoyed me. And I'm the opposite of that. I was a total wuss and it took me like 12 years before I could fully quit and just go on my own. I remember I was walking with one of my CEOs at the time who ran a company called First Trust, a guy I still love and respect to this day. And I told him what I wanted to do and how I wanted to earn more money and how I wanted the business to grow. And he kind of told me, not your boat, not your oars. If you want to row in the other direction, I welcome that, but it's not here. I was like, kind of gave me like a little bit of an ultimatum. You can either do this or you can bail, get on board or get motoring. What I ended up doing is I finally decided that I would leave the company the second that I made enough money that I could replace what my monthly nut was. So the amount that I had to make every month in order to get my expenses covered. And so I started doing that by doing a little side hustle, which I called business buying on the side. When that got big enough, then I left the company, which is usually how I think about doing this. The moral of the story is something like 60 to 70% of people, if they're going to leave a job, they leave it because their boss sucks. Because, I think bad bosses are the number one reason there are great entrepreneurs. And if there are less bad bosses, there'd be less great entrepreneurs. And so if at the end of the day, you have an unreasonable boss that will not work for you, you must leave. And when you leave, I think you have two ways to do it. You go lateral in order to get a little bit more pay and the ability to have a better boss in order to hopefully, if your next job, you can't do it in this one, you do an up and down jump where you get a higher pay, a higher title too. But at some point, you do just have to leave. And that's okay.
I think we should now move on to Steal My Rich Friend, which is not going to be Steal My Rich Friend this week because the friends are actually people that responded to a tweet that you put up earlier today.
Oh, and by the way, you guys, if you're listening to this right now, we're going to start doing a bunch of Q&As with questions that we get on YouTube. So if you're listening to us on YouTube right now at the Big Deal Podcast, go comment on the videos, drop your questions in there, and Rachel's going to keep pulling those. And so whether those are questions we answer or we do a list of them and we get those questions to people on the pod, it'll be a chance for us to kind of get to know each other.
When should you jump from doing a side hustle that's not working? So instead of quitting your main job, when can you quit that side job if it's just not working out? Like how much time and effort should you be putting into that?
Yeah, I've failed like 3x the number of actual businesses that I've succeeded in. There's a saying in hiring and firing, which is hire slow, fire fast. It's the same with side hustles. It's pick your side hustle kind of slowly and bail on it quickly if you see that there's not product market fit. Like if you look at the reason why small businesses fail, something like 70% of small businesses, which would be like startups, fail because they never hit product market fit. And what does product market fit mean? It means nobody gives you money for you to give them X that you've created. So I would say a side hustle is one point at this stage of your career for you to make money, right? So if it's not making you money, it's not a side hustle, it's called charity. And you can do charity, but know that that's what you're doing. And so for me, I got a 90-day rule, which is if you can't start a side hustle and make money that is profitable dollars in your pocket after 90 days, then you bail on it. And you could try the next one. And since this isn't your main thing, it's perfectly fine for you to have some shots on goal because you don't actually know what it feels like to hit a three-pointer until you have tried and tried and tried and tried again. And then eventually you'll be like, oh, that's what it feels like when it's easy. And you won't know that if you don't have a lot of shots on goal.
Interesting that you say 90 because there's this rule. It's called like the 21-90 rule. And it suggests that it takes 90 days for a habit to become a permanent lifestyle change. So I like that you said 90. How long did it take before you hit break even from leaving and then growing further?
Oh, well, we were talking about this because you had a job, right? You don't think about all the expenses that goes into when you're doing it by yourself. You had a job working with a bunch of podcasts, right, where you were paid W-2, and then you decided to go out on your own. And then it took you, about a month before you were gross revenue making more than you were previously, right? Because you probably didn't keep a P&L, I would guess.
I did keep a P&L.
Look at you, nerd.
Yeah.
I'm so proud.
Yeah, I did. But so it probably took like 3 months.
Okay, it took
for me
3 months for you to hit where you were making more than your previous role or where you were profitable?
To when I was profitable, but that is because I started saving up really early for the things that I knew I was going to have to replace crazy early on. So while I still had my 9 to 5, I bought things for the company and was able to, with much smaller, like selling my clothes on the internet type style, making money, afford to buy things like a new laptop, like a home setup and things like that. If I didn't do that, I think it would have taken me much
like 6
longer.
months.
Yeah,
definitely
like 6 months.
What would you need to know then? You'd need to know from the time you leave to at least 90 days after that, you're probably in the red. You're losing money. Maybe at about 90 days, if you're a services-based business like you are, so that means that you're trading, your skill set and time for somebody else's dollars. Those are the fastest businesses that give you your cash on cash return right away, like give you your money back. I didn't start making more money in my side hustles than in my main job for like years. I mean, because I made a lot of money. I was making maybe $1 million before I quit. So in order for me to make up $1 million in annual salary, it took me a long time of investing in small businesses, of doing investments, of having a few of them pay off quickly. It's not like a paycheck. So when you're getting a paycheck, you're like, I don't know, it's $5,000 every 2 weeks, $5,000 every 2 weeks, $5,000 every 2 weeks, and maybe you get a little bonus. When you are running your own business, I wish it was that even. It's not. Like, we had a couple months where we lost money. We had a couple months where we made a ton of money. And so you also have to be able to do what's called forward projecting and figure out what you might do on a go-forward basis. And so if you're listening to this, assume that the 6-month emergency fund that you have, you're going to need more than that if you want to run a small business. And it's going to take a while for you to break even between the two. And so don't expect anything different than that. And otherwise, I think you set yourself up for failure.
We got quite a few questions on people that were trying to balance high stress jobs while balancing families. And one of the questions I thought were interesting within there, the person was basically like, listen, like my job is just way too high stress. I am going to have to go to a lower paying job. Like that's just how this is going to have to work for me. What advice do you have for people that are going to have to make a jump And in order, like that trade-off is going to be like more family time, yes, and maybe less stress, but a lower paying salary. Like, do you have any words of wisdom there?
I always ask myself, what if it was easy? And so the team hears this from me a lot. I think you sometimes need a mental reframe. You said a statement that I am not sure is true. And the statement is that no matter what, in order to have less stress, I need to make less money. I would say back to you, what if you don't? And what if it's in fact easy for you to not do that? And so once you start asking yourself questions like that, it just opens your brain entirely. And so now you might say something like, I might just be one hire away from a totally different business. For instance, let's say you're an attorney, and so it's super high stress, you have billable hours, you're feeling a little bit trapped by that, and you don't know how to get away from it except for you to have a lower paying job. I don't know. Can you take some consulting on the side that is project-based as opposed to hourly-based? And can you hire somebody off Upwork and a mixture of ChatGPT to do a part of the job that's lower level for you? And so you're having to bill a bunch of things and hours at a law firm that perhaps you don't actually need to if you go out on a project basis. Could you also structure something as a productized service as opposed to an hourly billable rate as an attorney? And so, a lot of things in life for me are just, are you asking yourself the right questions? And if you're asking yourself the right questions, you will often find answers that nobody else will. The problem is we get constrained in thinking that puts us inside of a box, not even in first principles thinking, but in, societal thinking. And I would want to break out of that mindset.
And last question, how to quit your job if you are the boss?
God, we just hired a guy for a company called BizScout, and he worked at a large marketplace. And I bought this company, and he's going to go in as the CEO. And the sign that you have a great hire is that the company that he's leaving or she's leaving, they don't want them to leave. And so they want to extend their time, even though they're saying, I'm going to leave, that the company goes, wait, can you give us more time? And that's what they did with Bobby. Bobby did the right thing. First of all, he said, I would never leave a company and only give you 2 weeks. I'm going to give you 4 to 6 weeks. And if you need it, great. If you don't need it, great. And negotiating that between the two companies is a major move. And here's why you might want to do that. Because we found some statistics that basically show that upwards of 60, 70, or even 80% of people regret leaving the job that they had previously. And then another, let's call it 60% of people, actually thought that they would get a better next job and hopped for something that they thought was better, but it actually wasn't. So think about that for a second. If it's the case that you might actually regret going back, why wouldn't you diminish that regret by not burning the bridge? Everybody always talks about you should burn all the bridges. I would do the exact opposite. I would say to your boss, I love it here. I need to take a chance on myself. I want to go do this other big risky thing. I would never put you in a bad position. So let me give you somewhere between, I don't know, just 3 to 5 to 6 weeks work for you. If you only want 2 weeks, awesome. But I'm here for you regardless. And I'm happy to take, sort of a one-off 1099 consulting thing if you need it on the time. I know it's hard to find good people. Your boss is going to go, that's awesome. Thank you. They'll say, good. I need it. I don't need it. And if you want an even more pro move, you could say, I have a few people that I think would be really great for this job. So that's what I did when I left my last private equity company. I said, I'm leaving. I think you should hire my number 2, that was my COO at the time, and you should put her in my position. And she's still there to this day, and she's crushing it. And I allowed her to become the CEO of a division, and I allowed them to have a very easy transition. And now I'm still friends with the CEO. And oh, by the way, this guy's a billionaire and wants to invest in my stuff. Don't burn the bridge, actually. Even if you fucking hate your boss, which at some point, sorry, Jim, I hated this guy. And I hated the managers of this company. And I thought some of the managers of that company were the most chauvinistic idiots I'd ever met in my entire life. I had my ass slapped so hard, I had a red handprint on it at a company meeting in front of a bunch of other people. Shout out, Mike, you know who you are. On the other hand, I learned a ton there. And so I actually gave a really smooth transition. I'm friends to this day with a bunch of the people there. And some of them have invested in some of my companies. And so even if you hate them, I think remember that most humans, all of us are flawed. There's some people that hate you. There are many people that hate me. And so giving people a little benefit of the doubt is probably a good thing.
I think we should transition now to CEO story time. Strong. You have some pretty aggressive views on working from home. I work from home. I would love to hear your thoughts and really just rip into this topic.
I think one of the worst things we ever did was try to tell people that remote work was better. myself included. Now that we have an office here, really cool studio, we've got our small group. There's no fluorescent lights. There's no drop ceilings in sight. We've realized how much more fun it is to be with a group of people who are crazily building something even into the deep hours of the night. And that there is something really invigorating about other humans being around you, doing the thing that you're going to spend more time in your life doing than almost anything else except for maybe sleeping. I think if you are young, hungry, and you want to make big moves and make a bunch of money, you should not take a remote job. You want to be in the office. Now, you want to be in a cool office. You hopefully don't want to have a 75-minute commute. You want to optimize a little bit for lifestyle, but you should try to be around other winners because it's way more fun. The thing that's interesting about your job is you're remote, but you kind of pop in and pop out of here, right? So you get a little bit of this. And then you're in New York City, in the city proper, right? And so you're actually able to engage with a ton of people every single day. And so that makes things slightly different. But for most people, who here feels like you could have more Zoom meetings and that'd be really fun for you? Nobody. Like, how can you be inspired and want to do big things when you're just on Zoom 24/7? We are tribal communal animals that need other people around us. A fast way to unhappiness and lack of motivation is sitting in front of your computer screen for 10 hours a day, Zoom meeting each other.
I've actually gone against this too. So I used to be diehard work from home, and now I go into offices probably 2 or 3 days a week. So
By choice, right?
I'll say yes, by choice. Half a day. I'm not a full dayer, and I do not plan to be. But I do think that it's been since 2020 that I've been remote, and it's 2024. My first job was remote, and it was really difficult. I'm sure for other people as well. It's how do you get seen as somebody that's worth promoting if you are a remote employee?
It's kind of useful for us to know. We were talking about this today. It's you get to hang out in your pajamas for 2 years post-COVID, and you kind of forget how to put outfits on and how to do your hair and makeup. And, you don't have to do all of the things that adults need to do. And so we had just hired somebody the other day, and she had a real tough time coming back after a couple years off work. And so I think once you get out of the workforce, real hard to get back in. Even if you just keep your little Tootsie in there, just one little finger, I think it's really important to try.
So one thing, as a work from homer, you have to have crazy discipline. It sucks. Sometimes you really have to be on top of it. What advice do you have on people transitioning from working from home to a full-time job do you have that don't have that level of discipline?
Here's the tough truth. If you stop playing a sport for a while, let's say you stop running track, and you don't do it for 2 years or a year, and then you try to get back on the team, collegially, let's say at college, and you expect to, after not running for a certain period of time, a year plus, for you to get chosen and start winning is basically never going to, you would never think that. You would never go, listen, I haven't played the sport in 2 years or a year. I'm going to go out and I'm going to crush it. That's just not the case. You're not going to. So the tough part is, I think if you haven't played the game in a while, you have to play harder than everybody else and longer than everybody else. And there's basically no other way around it. If you want to get back in the game of being an employee, you got to employ harder than the rest of everybody else. The older you are, the harder that gets, myself included. If I was going to go back into the workforce and have to work for somebody else, not myself, I would probably have to scale up pretty quickly my ability to use ChatGPT. I'm not really that good at that right now. I would have to scale up really quickly how to use, Slack and integrations and all of that. I'm not that good at that. So just expect a 20 to 30% work harder rate for 6 months, which means that you start a job as an executive assistant, you come in 20 to 30% earlier than everybody else, and you probably stay 20 to 30% longer than everybody else, and you're working quite a bit harder with less distractions because you're just not good enough yet. And I only think you need to do that for 90 days to 6 months, at which point you've normalized. Anybody who tells you can just jump right back in, it's probably not going to be the case. You're going to have to work harder for a period because you're just not as good anymore.
We've been talking a lot about you, as you said before, you call yourself as corporate as they come. I've never worked anywhere with an HR department. What has your experience been? Have you ever had an HR experience? These are the kind of stories I want to hear.
Oh, God. The only time, so I think I've had 6 people leave me in my career running businesses and divisions where I didn't let them go or they moved on to a new division within the company, 6 people. And of those 6 people, all of them except one, it's too soon to tell, we'll see if she comes back, have come back and wanted a job in some way, shape, or form, which is really interesting. And I did rehire one of them who's been awesome. But The only one of them that really left in a bad way. Everybody else left total pro moves. The only one that left badly was a young woman. And she went to HR as a partner at the firm. I didn't run the company at this time. And basically said that she thought that I was paying less because she was a woman. And I was like, the thing is, I also have a vagina. And so I don't see why I would do that. And then it's a sales company. And so I don't actually determine pay. It's like how much you sell is how much you make. And so one thing that I would be really careful of these days, turning yourself into a victim when you leave. And this is like tough advice that I'm sure the internet's not going to love. The reason that, she wasn't making as much money is because she wasn't bringing in as much money. End of story. And she really deminimized her credibility by using a story like that. And at least for me, because, thankfully I am a woman and a Latina, so I got the double check mark out there for all of the PC world, is that I don't really take well to being blackmailed in any way, shape, or form. So I wouldn't really be scared by somebody coming out and saying, well, I'm going to say something because I'm a woman. I don't care. Like, as long as we are not doing something wrong, if we're doing all the right things, I will stand up for our practices and our employees. And so that person, she's since come back, kind of apologized, talked about it since then. I would never recommend her again. And I would never push her on to the next level. Now, I think sometimes you do stuff when you're young that you wish you hadn't done. And I have plenty of those. Like if I look back at young Codie, I think the first time that I asked for a raise, I just assigned a percentage to it. And I asked it like after I had just gotten, a title change and a little bit of a raise. So I've done it wrong myself so many times too, guys. But what I would say is it really never ends well if you use the victim card. Your bosses are going to remember. It's not going to get you ahead long term. You're better than that. If that sort of stuff is going on, just get out, go find a new role somewhere where you don't feel like that's happening to you. But I would never play the victim. One thing we almost didn't cover that I want to make sure we do is if you work for a big company or a company with a good name, that can last you like decades. I haven't worked at Goldman Sachs since like 2008. And I was like a peon analyst nobody back then. And yet the first thing people say about me still is that I worked at Goldman Sachs. You worked at a couple of companies that are really big name podcasts. We won't mention them. But I hired you because of that. I mean, also because you're lovely and you're Rachel, but like I didn't know those other things. And so the real problem that I think we don't realize is we have to like treasure the couple big names that we get because they can actually catapult you for the rest of your career. So what did you do when you quit? Because you're real fresh off of that to make sure that they didn't hate you and they would say nice things about you.
I gave enough time. I really tried to prepare like a Notion page or like a doc of everything that I did, explaining it. I watched a bunch of videos like this, explaining like how I can quit my job in the best way. I liked my job. Like I didn't quit my job because I didn't like it. So I think that's like a unique experience. I quit my job because I was ready for the next thing. And the next thing I felt like was what I'm doing right now. So I think that kind of put me in a unique place. And I also did something that I didn't know was going to happen when I quit. But after I quit, they asked me to come back. They asked me to come back a little bit on like a contracting basis just a few times. And every time they did that, I said yes, as much as I possibly could. I even tried one time when I was like trying to work off internet that like was so bad. I'm looking at it like I probably shouldn't have said yes. But every time they asked me to do something, even after I left, I tried to be as helpful as humanly possible because I really liked that role. And I think that has served me well.
You can also leave your mark on an organization for years to come if you do SOPs of what your job is. Yeah. Like if you uniquely tie it up, one thing that I didn't realize back in the day is uniquely tying it up also gave me the frameworks to then use in my next job. So like I was like, oh, well, every single time I'm going to document how I reach out to clients. I'm going to document how I engage from the hours of 9 to 5. I'm going to document all the important phone numbers that I have. And that's actually really not hard. That is all very easy to do. It just takes some work and nobody does it. And if you wrap a bow like that for your last employer, your likelihood of getting an incredible letter of recommendation, of them investing in you in the future if you want, of them even introducing you to other people for other jobs is actually really, really big. And I was like I really like believed my own bullshit for a lot of years when I was working. And so I was really like, I kind of thought I was a badass. And so I think there were probably 2 times where I left a company in a not great way, where I left a company and I said, I'm out, I'm going to a competitor, 2 weeks, see you later, and I kind of had a chip on my shoulder. If I could have done that again, I would have done it differently.
On that, I think that is a great way to end this episode, Codie.
We did this because 49% of people in the U.S. right now say they want to quit their job in some way, shape, or form, which is a lot of you. A lot of people don't know how to quit. They don't know the right way to quit. They don't know how to ask for more money, and they don't know how to move on to the next thing. We have one deal here. We try to give you the deal, and we ask for one deal in return, which is that you seal the deal, that you subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. I do think that you all are builders in a world of consumers. You're super rare. I see each and every one of you. To me,
you know that I got it. No need to look all in a bag. Stunting like this because I work so hard. I'm the best. I only speak facts.
You basically had a guide who kind of said, hey, I really think you should go to rehab. And you said something along the lines of, I think I can handle it without rehab. If I relapse again, I'll go. And the guy said, last time I heard that excuse, the guy died choking on his own vomit. Are you sure you want to risk it? And you said, yes.
Alcohol works until it stops working. Suffering was the ultimate teacher for me.
Let's say 20 billionaires I've met. Half of them have gone through bankruptcy and almost been broke. The prize never goes to the fastest guy. It goes to the guy who slows down the least.
If you guys are struggling, I want you to sit in this episode because this guest has been through it and I think can teach us a few things. Now, some people think about Rich Roll and they think hair so good, he probably is a Pantene commercial. They think crazy abs. They think top podcaster. They think ultra marathoner, but also crippling alcoholism. Also huge pain, suffering, change of career, and he's 57 plus on a long marathon of life. And so I hope you guys, if you are feeling a little lost, if things are just hard right now, if you're wondering what to do next, if you don't know how to have a difficult conversation with somebody who is struggling with addiction that you love, but you need your boundaries too. If you are struggling with addiction, if you're just struggling with not being the exact person you want to be, I think this episode might be for you. I really liked it. I think it might be one of my favorite ones I've done yet. So without a further ado, Rich Roll.
I want to share a quick business tip that I've been thinking a lot about lately. It's eliminate, automate, delegate. So if you do tasks in that order in your business, it runs more smoothly. I'm always looking for tools to help eliminate tasks, then automate them, and then finally delegate those that are absolutely necessary. One of those tools is Riverside. Not only can it record 4K video and audio remotely to make sure your podcast quality is top notch, but it's also drastically improved my team's editing speed with the text-based editor. Transcribes your footage, removes silences in one click, and creates these short clips just by selecting the text. Even better, if you make a mistake, which we try not to do, you can delete the sentence and the transcript will delete it from your video instantly. So Riverside has an in-platform editor where you can upload your own content too. So it's not just footage recorded on Riverside that gets the special treatment. So how do people find new podcasts? Often from seeing clips, right? You see a bunch of mine. Riverside gets this, and that's why I like their AI Magic Clips. Analyzes moments in your podcast that have the most potential to get traction online. That saves hours of listening to your podcast for the 5th time to find the perfect clip. Riverside's got you covered. We're always trying to remove, automate, not add, and complicate. But don't waste your time doing what Riverside can do for you. I got you guys a deal. If you want to try it for yourself, get the Riverside link in the description and use the code Codie for an exclusive discount just for y'all.
Bring the band in. Let's go.
So this week's interesting, Rich, having you here because I was in what I call the pain cave this week, which was just it was a brutal week. Like, multiple things going wrong in 2 of my businesses. I was sick last week. I had a friend go in a hospital and it felt really heavy. And typically, maybe me, like a lot of people, I don't share all that stuff. I'm like, it's part of the game. We just keep going. No big deal. But for whatever reason, I shared it this week and I had a bunch of people sort of, commiserate and say like, it does feel tough right now. And then you and I were at this conference this last week where we both spoke. When I brought that up to the audience, they all felt it. And then when you spoke, I heard from a bunch of them afterwards that they really resonated with you sharing sort of the pain, not just all the gains that you've had. Because if people look at the outside and they don't know your story, they see Rich Roll, sort of famous podcaster, multi-time best-selling author, cover of Men's Fitness, like 62 pack, great hair also. And, post 50, you got kids, you got a wife, like you got the whole thing. And yet what I found most fascinating about you in some ways is that most people who come online, they do it by sharing all their gains. And you didn't. You came online basically sharing a bunch of your pain. And so when I was reading your book and a lot of your background, it wasn't so much just the fact that you have gone through pain, addiction, changed your life, completely redefined your life, then launched like, a podcast platform company now called Boise Changes, what we're going to talk about, but that you say things like, I loved the pain and the pain loved me back. I wanted to start off by asking you, what do you mean by that? And when did you start turning pain into your actual teacher as opposed to your tormentor?
That's a great question. I mean, first of all, thank you for having me. It's delightful to meet you, and I'm very happy to be here. I think pain became my teacher very early in my life. I was a pretty awkward adolescent kid who struggled to make friends, was unsure about how to connect, and always felt constitutionally different from my peers, which made me introverted and shy and reluctant to place myself in social situations. And I also was somebody like a young kid who showed zero promise in terms of athletic prowess. Like I can't hit a ball. I can't, kick a soccer ball. Like anything with eye-hand coordination, I've always been a disaster. So I was the last kid picked for kickball. I was bullied at the bus stop, like all the kind of, stuff that is visited upon an awkward young child. But the one thing that I did have a little bit of innate talent and prowess in was in the swimming pool. As a young kid, like I loved being on the summer swim team. And I was actually quite good at that. And there was a decision that I made around 13, 14 years old that I wanted to really invest in that. And I found myself as part of a club team in Washington, D.C., where suddenly I was surrounded by very talented young athletes who had national age group records or had qualified for the Olympic trials. And I realized immediately that the talent that I thought I had wasn't really what I thought it was. But I also discovered pretty quickly that I had a capacity to suffer and to work hard. And in a pretty short period of time, that started to pay dividends. And I was able to basically narrow the talent deficit gap through sheer volume and effort. And that was a powerful math equation for a young mind. And so suffering became a pathway for me to success and achievement that worked very well throughout junior high school and high school, such that by the time I was a senior in high school, still awkward, still insecure, still felt like I didn't know how to make friends or connect with other people. But I was able to rise to prominence as a swimmer and get recruited at all the colleges and was nationally ranked. And that skill set of focus and determination paid off in the classroom as well, because I'd always struggled as a student, but suddenly I was able to figure that out as well. And so I graduated near the top of my class and had all of these opportunities when I was 18 years old. I had the pick of the litter in terms of colleges. I was being lauded as this athlete, and the world was really my oyster. So suffering, to your point, to your question, suffering as a teacher, suffering was the ultimate teacher for me. Not only was it a teacher, it was like the solution to finding my way in the world. But it was very much premised on self-will. Like, I'm in charge. I have control over this thing. It's up to me. And if I'm willing to outwork everybody else, then I will be able to achieve any goal that I set for myself.
Do you think that bullying and getting picked last for kickball, and whether that's as a kid even, or the same sort of parallels as an adult, do you think that was actually good for you in some ways?
At the conference the other night, they asked me if I could give advice to a younger version of myself, what would it be? Mm-hmm. And, the joke that I always tell, because I get asked that question a lot, is like, just stop drinking, first of all, like this is not working for you. But the truth of the matter is that I don't know that I would change anything, because all of those experiences were formative and have produced the individual that I am today. And I lived this amazing life, and I'm incredibly grateful and privileged, but it's a result of having to weather obstacles and, go to war with myself and learn how to develop a level of equanimity in the face of crisis or, financial dismantling and all these other kind of things that I've experienced, from the low lows of being a gutter alcoholic to being the head of a household with 4 kids and a mortgage and being unable to pay my bills. Like, I've gone through a lot and I've made various transformations along the way. But I don't know what life would look like had I been spared those.
Yeah. One of my favorite mentors said to me that I wish for you nothing except to live the full spectrum of the human experience. And I always loved that line in theory until I started understanding it in quasi practice, right? That, if your life is rosy and sunshine all the way, you're really getting just one end of the color spectrum, let's say, of humanity. But you have not had that. You have had a very big spectrum. It's been really wide. When we were talking earlier, you were telling me a little bit about the time where maybe for most of your life, you felt like you had no control over money. You felt financially inept, and, you lived in it for much longer than you wished you had, I think is how you put it. Can you talk about that period? Because we'll get to the end about winning and strength and endurance and the hero's journey at the end. But I don't think a lot of people know that. I mean, I've met, I don't know, of the, let's say 20 billionaires I've met, I think probably about half of them have gone through bankruptcy and almost been broke many, many times. And so it'd be interesting to share that side.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a household where all my needs were met. My parents are still married. They took care of me. I, had the privilege of going to nice schools and a fancy college and law school and the like. But what happened with me was around 18, 19 years old, I discovered alcohol. And it wasn't long before alcohol became my primary driver. Like, all of my ambitions and my goals and my aspirations and my dreams suddenly became secondary to the search for where my next good time was going to be. That was the most important thing. And look, I was a functional alcoholic for a long time, but alcohol works until it stops working. And in the case of people who suffer from alcoholism, like myself, it ultimately took me to some really dark and desperate places. There's nothing romantic or rock and roll about it. And my drunk-a-log really isn't all that spectacular. It's pretty mundane, actually, and boring. But along the way, I just became retrobate in like all of my ethics and my morals and my values. And that included any kind of financial responsibility. So I lived in New York City. I had a job as a paralegal in a law firm. I wasn't making very much money, but it was a time in which you could get credit cards easily. And it didn't take me long before I was racking up credit card debt. And even throughout law school and after law school, when I got a job at a decent law firm and then another law firm and was being paid a pretty good salary, my drinking was out of control and I was completely irresponsible. I could never make ends meet. I was always in the red and overdrawn by the time, for a couple of days before I was going to get my next paycheck. And I think over time, over many, many years of just that level of irresponsibility, I became convinced that I was constitutionally incapable of understanding money or managing it in any kind of responsible way. I very much had a poverty mindset and just believed to my core that I would never be able to be viable financially. Like, I just didn't think I had the capacity to make money, save money, and be responsible with it. And to reflect back on that now, because now I am financially stable and I have, built businesses that are viable and successful. It's actually a miracle that I've been able to overcome that. And we were sharing before the podcast that I still have residue of that, though. Like, I can still detect where I feel a sense of unworthiness around money and my relationship to it. Like, am I responsible? I have a business partner now, and he has, been fundamental in helping me overcome this and creating stability and infrastructure around what I do, because I'm very much an unlikely entrepreneur, and I needed him to be a mentor and to teach me and to hold my hand and to, create something and show me along the way, like how to do this. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. It's been, an amazing relationship with this individual. But yeah, I mean, I suffered from that terribly. And even in sobriety, I got sober at 31. In the aftermath of that, I still couldn't square the equation. Like it just took me a really long time. And then when I decided to leave the law and venture into the unknown and incur risk, because I grew up in a very risk averse household. We went through many years of financial uncertainty and dismantlement. And I've had cars repossessed and, we weren't able to pay our mortgage. Like all of this, seeps into my consciousness and is evidence of like my lack of maturity or my irresponsibility or my incapacity to not master, but just fundamentally like steward with any level of responsibility the dollar.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is I remember I was speaking at an event and the woman in front of me did this really interesting thing. It was a women's conference. And she said, everybody close your eyes. All the women in the audience, all pretty like business women. I don't know about their financial situation, but business women, so like relatively successful in some way, shape, or form. Close your eyes. And I want you to make a physical representation of what money means to you. So like, if you're happy, you're going to make your body move in a way that makes you feel happy. Like, what do you feel when you say the word money? What does that feel for you? And like, make your body move. And I was sitting sort of backstage. I was kind of watching the audience while everybody else had their eyes closed. And what was interesting is she goes, okay, nobody move, but open your eyes. And basically what you saw across like 80 or 90% of the audience is when I think about money now, if somebody was to tell me, give me a physical representation of money, I'd be like, money, I'd be like, yes, give it to me. Great. And in the audience, it was like, they were like this, they were like this, they were like, money or like money. It was like very small type movements. And it made me realize how pervasive this idea is. That like actually for some reason, most of us have this relationship with money, which makes sense because, most Americans die, overweight and alone and broke. It kind of maybe makes sense that we feel that way. But what I think is also really interesting about your story in particular is this thing about credit cards. One is real. Also fascinating how the US system has like 3x the interest rates of credit cards of the European system. So like some things are set up against you already and you have to overcome them just in the way probably you do with food. But the other thing that's interesting about that situation, I think is, when you were going through this, you not only had money issues, but some health issues, obviously some sobriety issues. You've talked about something that I really liked, which was the contagious nature of discipline and how discipline's contagious and it can kind of trickle through multiple aspects of your life. If at this time you kind of had lots of things going wrong, or if somebody's listening and they have lots of things going wrong, how do you figure out what to fix first?
Yeah, that's a great question. Discipline is contagious. And I think you have to start first with understanding what you have control over and what you don't. When I began this journey that I've been on, it began with, what am I putting in my mouth? I have control over that. I don't have control over how people respond to me, how people react to me, whether I'm going to get this gig or that gig, or this thing is going to work out. All of those things that produce so much anxiety for us are very much out of our control. And so there is a surrender that you have to undergo, like a releasing of your attachment to outcomes, and a reconfiguration of your focus on the very small things that you have control over. We don't have control over a lot. We have control over how we respond or react to situations and how we treat ourselves and other people. And that's kind of it, right? So when you drill it down to these tiny things, and begin the process of honoring yourself by making a better choice in the most micro way possible, those things compound. Self-esteem is the product of performing esteemable acts on behalf of yourself and others. But when you do something that's honoring yourself, like I'm going to not eat that French fry and I'm going to have the salad. Pick your example. They seem like tiny little things, but when you begin to aggregate those things and understand that how you do anything is how you do everything. These things build. And I'm somebody who is the furthest thing from an overnight success. I am an ultra endurance athlete in sport, but also in life. Like, I'm 57 now, and I feel like I'm only starting to connect the dots and feel comfortable with who I am and what I share with the world. And, things didn't even really begin for me until my mid 40s. And I think I shared this at the event the other night. I'm pretty sure I am the oldest. I'm 57. I'm the oldest person to have like a big, like, multi-million-dollar shoe contract. So it's somebody who their whole life aspired to be a professional athlete, and like a big shoe deal is sort of like an emblem of like being a successful professional athlete. I'm here to tell you that I accomplished that at 57. So these things, my point being, like, everything takes a lot of time, and I'm not in a hurry, and I'm patient, and I understand that it is those tiny little things that you're doing every day in that kind of James Clear Atomic Habits way that move the mountain. And they're the easiest things to brush aside or ignore or dismiss. And yet for me, I'm fully aware and cognizant that those are the important things that you have to do. And I think, to your earlier point, when I reflect, you were making me kind of reflect back on this journey. There's something at the cost of being a little woo-woo and spiritual.
We're lost in. You're good.
There is something curiously mystical about the fact that I spent decades trying to fulfill the expectations of society by pursuing the traditional path of wealth and success. I went to a nice private boys' school in Washington, D.C. I got into all the Ivy League colleges and went to Stanford. I went to Cornell Law School, and I got the job at the law firm. So I was very much on this traditional track towards what we deem success to be. And no matter how much I began to scale that ladder upwards, it was not solving that crisis of happiness that I was having. And I wasn't able to make the money work either. So it didn't matter what my salary was. I couldn't save money because I was so deeply unhappy that the only way I could solve that discomfort was to spend the money I had on things that I thought would fill that hole. And it wasn't until I got to such a place of existential angst over this that I was willing to walk away from it and let it go and really do the inside work of trying to understand what it was that I wanted to do and what I wanted to express and what I wanted to stand for and what I wanted to pursue, that the birth of what I do today began. And anybody and everybody would have said and did say to me at that time that I was insane, that this didn't make any sense, that this was, a path to poverty, that I began to put something together that was not only personally meaningful, but became more financially successful than anything I could have done had I stayed on that traditional track. And so I think there is an energy piece to this as well. Like, why are you pursuing the path that you're on? What is your motivation? Is it internally driven? Is it based on your sense of meaning and purpose and value? Or is it the echo of your parents and your community or however you've been raised to believe that this is what you need to do? So are you doing it for external reasons or internal reasons? And I had to go on a very long, fraught road to figure that out for myself.
So good. Yeah, it reminds me of something else that was in your book about, the prize never goes to the fastest guy. It goes to the guy who slows down the least. True in endurance sports and possibly even truer in life, which I love that line. It's very true. I mean, if you look at the average age of millionaires in the US, it's actually late 40s. And if you look at the average age of billionaires in the US, it's late 60s. And so we have these people on Instagram that are driving Ferraris at 20, doing drop shipping courses and selling this dream that is just statistically and numerically not true. And I think we need more examples of people who look differently, sharing the real instead of the fake. And, it's interesting about the credentializing that you went through, or the credentialing from Stanford and, your sort of upper end high school is, I was talking to this small business owner the other day here who owns a dry cleaners, like family owned business, in the business for decades, Latino dude. And I was asking him, what is he going to do with the business when he moves on next? And it's kind of interesting because they bought the real estate for the small business. They own it. You can tell they've like sort of cobbled together different parts of the building, over the years. He has a picture of his dad who started the business behind him. And I said, he's like, well, I'm going to run it till I die. And then I'm like, how old are you? And he's like, well, I'm 72. I'm like, man, not that far away, right? Like we need a better plan than that. And I'm like, your kid's going to take it over? And he said, no. I worked hard so my kids didn't have to. I thought, interesting. Okay, what do your kids do? And he goes, well, I sent them to school, right? And, one is an accountant and one is a consultant. Mm-hmm. And I kind of had a chuckle for a moment inside because that's such a thing that I'm Latino, my Latino parents would have done. And yet, when did we decide that we would find more joy pursuing credentials and employment in other people's professions that have some sort of PhD, JD, whatever at the end of it, instead of maybe having some of our own bizarre skin in the game path, which is what you have. And so one thing we could skip to a little bit that I thought was super interesting is you went like a wild path kind of, which was, you were an entertainment lawyer, right? Entertainment?
Yeah, I started as a litigator and then became a transactional entertainment lawyer later.
Yeah.
In the later phases of my legal career.
Slightly maybe more entertaining, although not a ton. And you have this other thing that I loved, which was a quote from Joseph Campbell, I believe, about one can spend one's whole life climbing the ladder only to realize it's been placed against the wrong wall. And I think you kind of realized that you were on the wrong wall.
Yeah.
But when did you realize that? And how hard was that to change?
Really hard. I think my realization of it was always there on a low level, and it just was brewing until it got to a point
like
where
you felt it in your gut,
boiling over. Yeah, I mean, because I have this facility for suffering and working hard, I can force my way through anything. And so, whether it's law school, like I actually enjoyed law school. I enjoyed the academic pursuit of that. That's very different from the practice of law. And I knew pretty quickly once I arrived at the first law firm that hired me that this was not for me, but I can put my nose to the grindstone and like do the work. I'm smart enough to do the work and like, I can like make it work. But I began to notice around me, like some of these people like this. Like I actually really don't like this. Like I have to summon so much will in order to like focus and like get this stuff done. And I know that I'm not made for it. Like it doesn't come easy, but I'll figure it out. And I think in the back of my mind, I thought, well, everybody's having this experience with this. And I didn't realize that it came easier for other people. And there were other people who actually liked it. Like I'm very conflict averse. I don't really enjoy being in the middle of conflict. And here I am, a litigation associate at a law firm. That's all it is. And I'd be like in a deposition or, at a hearing. I'm like, can't you guys just get over this? Like, what's the big deal? Like life is short, man. And then, and realizing the other lawyers like thrive on conflict. They just love it. They can't wait. They come armed with their arguments. And I was really good at writing briefs, but not so great in the oral argument department. And I was like, what am I doing? Like I literally I've invested all this time and energy and I'm in a career that is completely at odds with my natural disposition, which is like, I want to be with people who are building something in a collaborative way. And I'm in an environment that is the opposite of that. And if you resolve a conflict through trial or a settlement agreement, you're rewarded with another conflict to work on, And this started to like grate on my soul. So by the time I got I got sober at 31, and the experience of spending 100 days in treatment provided enough clarity for me to realize, like, I'm in the wrong career. Like, I know that. But like I said, like, so much time and energy and money had gone into, becoming this person. It then becomes very hard to let go of it. And if you Google my name and you get some kind of abbreviated version of my story, it looks like all of these decisions and transformations took place in a very compressed period of time, but it couldn't be further from the case. Like, I remained a lawyer for many, many years in different incarnations after that, before I finally was ready to completely release. And I slid out of it very slowly. But I would say by the time I was 39, that's where the existential crisis was like a full blown thing that needed to be addressed. And that just happened to coincide with a health scare. I'd been stuffing my emotions with fast food and trying to medicate myself with unhealthy lifestyle habits. And those two things in tandem created a situation in which I was walking up a flight of, I've told the story many times, it's in my book, but I was walking up a flight of stairs to my bedroom late one night and had to pause. I was this former world-ranked Stanford swimmer and still would look in the mirror and think that I was still that guy. And here I couldn't walk up a simple flight of stairs without being winded, tightness in my chest. And it just opened a portal. Like, it was just one of those moments, like a line in the sand moment where, like, I can't live this way anymore. I need to make changes. And that's where controlling the controllables came in. Like, what can I do? Well, I don't know that I can walk away from my job or just reinvent myself wholesale overnight. I'm going to start with food, and food led to fitness, and fitness led to becoming this ultra endurance athlete. Like, all of these things kind of unfolded organically out of making one choice in a very heightened moment to change my relationship with myself. And so the podcast, the books, like this, all the stuff that I do now can all be traced back to that one moment and the compound interest of making a different decision and then building upon that.
Yeah. I'm still trying to picture you litigated in flip flops. Like, the whole image is just, you're right. It's just not a fit. There's no yarn bracelets allowed, no flip flops. But I actually think it's beautiful because when people are struggling, and I would say like something like 65% of Americans don't like their jobs. So, like, if you don't like what you're doing right now, you're in good company, because that's most people. And so, of course, you didn't think that it was normal for you to, or of course you thought it was normal for you to kind of not like what you did. That's what people say. It's work. Who likes work? Right?
Right.
And then they say, so that's one hand. But then on the other hand, they go, well, if you don't like it, just jump, take the jump, take the leap. Well, is the only way to move from point A to point B leaping or jumping off a cliff? Absolutely not. But there's not enough people that went through the corporate grind, I think, that are public now that talk about, hey, I was like you. I mean, most people work in a company for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I didn't just take a big leap and sleep on a basement and do this crazy startup and, have it skyrocket. It took me 10 years to get out. I was the same in finance, And
I think that reality, like that truth, makes it all the more problematic or pernicious when you scroll on Instagram or TikTok and you see all these people talking about, like, quit your job and reinvent, like, if you're not happy, then you owe it to yourself to leave. Like, I don't think any of that is helpful or responsible. And I think for people who are in a job that is, kind of soul sucking on some level, but really don't know how to make a change or how to reinvent, like, leap to what, right? Like, so all those messages, all they do is make people feel bad about their lives and the lack of agency that they have. I don't think they're in service to or empowering in any way. I think it's very insensitive to, this massive population of people who are in kind of jobs that they can, like, you can keep doing it. Like, it's a low grade kind of dissatisfaction. This sense that maybe there's something better out there, but no clarity on what that might be. And to say you should just quit your job or like go, create a business, I think lands on most people like, you don't understand my life, or you don't understand the difficulties or the predicaments of my life, because I have bills and I have kids, and I can't just do that.
Which is totally real.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's the difference between sort of, like you said, it's like low grade, consistent irritation, or you could say pain, versus acute asymmetric pain, right? And a lot of times our lives are filled with the low grade pain that you either have to realize you're slowly simmering or make some change. And one thing that I thought was really interesting is you have another tweet that I loved, which was, it's a little long, but the magic you are looking for is in the work you are attempting to avoid. Perfectionism and paralysis by analysis has killed more goals than failure ever could. So to parenthesize a little bit, do the damn thing, imperfect as you are, do it, because someday will eventually become never. And what I thought was interesting about this is then you go on to have different ways that you speak about taking the small bite, about doing the next thing that's in your control. But do you remember, was there a day or a moment where this eventually clicked for you? Was there one moment, or is this a series?
What clicks?
That I have to do something, that I have to make some sort of change in my life?
I mean, there was that moment on the staircase for sure. There was the moment.
Did you literally the next day go do?
Yeah, I did.
Interesting.
I did. Yeah, I did. And the reason that I was able to do that is because I had been visited with another line in the sand moment the day that I decided, like, I need to get sober and go to a treatment center.
Yeah.
And that decision, which was made one hungover morning that wasn't really all that different from many other hungover mornings that I'd experienced, changed my life permanently and saved my life. And so I knew the power of a single decision in a particular heightened moment. I knew the power, the potential energy that something like that holds. And so when I was on that staircase and having those emotions, it felt like that other day. And I was able to recall and remember, like, I made that decision and look how much my life changed. This feels kind of like that. What change or decision can I make right now that could be a version of that could change my life in a new and interesting way? And so what I did the next day was begin this like 7-day juice cleanse, not because I felt like I needed to detoxify my body, but what I needed to do was do something hard that was out of my comfort zone. When I went to the treatment center, I had to detox off drugs and alcohol. In the wake of that staircase episode, I needed like a detox for life. And so I needed to, create my own version of that to go through a transformative experience where I felt like I could reboot my operating system and shift my perspective. And I think if you want to draw any actionable insight from that, it's that I think that we are all visited by moments throughout our life that are sort of sliding doors into a different life. And unless we're fully present and have done enough self-reflection or we're in enough pain, a lot of those moments kind of pass us by. There are very short time windows that in which you can take an action that could shift you and put you on a different perspective, but it requires a level of cognizance when they're visited upon us. And so my call to action always to people is like, we all have these moments. Can you be present enough to honor it when it arrives and make that different decision in that heightened moment?
It's really beautiful. I love the analogy of the sliding door. There's something like very obvious. I almost picture like an airport, how when they have all the sliding doors on those trains that come by. It's true. You're going to have so many of them through life, but so often we don't take them. One thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is you talk a lot about addiction. And, our country's wild right now with, 46 million Americans dealing with drug and alcohol addiction. I can't even imagine if you layer workaholism. What's that word?
Workaholism.
Workaholism. Yeah. There we go. What porn and, social media addiction. So, you have to imagine, like, we all know somebody who's been addicted. And I kind of want to start first from the perspective of, I had a family member who struggled with a drug addiction that I'm very, very close with. And if I'm honest, I had no fucking idea how to be there, how to help. I had some resentments about it. I was like, just get it together. Like, what are we doing? I really didn't know how to be supportive and probably was not that supportive during it. And you had some really incredible things that you mentioned about what it's like to stand with people who are struggling with a severe addiction. Maybe one thing I want to start with is you said addiction solved a problem for people. So remember that. What do you mean by that?
When we think about addiction, we think about the substance or the behavior, whether it's gambling, fentanyl, alcohol, cocaine, heroin, choose your poison. We contemplate addiction in the context of the substance being the enemy. And I think it's important to understand that the substance or the behavior is actually the solution to the problem. The problem resides within the individual. It is a sense of dis-ease with oneself, a sense that your emotions and your sort of disposition is so uncomfortable that you are literally willing to go to the ends of the earth to feel differently. And the path to feeling differently can be found in one of these substances. It can be found in shopping, in relationships, in gambling, in porn, in sex, you name it. Like anything to take you out of your state and allow you to numb that emotional dis-ease with something external is the very nature of addiction. And I think when you are struggling to feel compassionate towards someone who suffers, it's important to disassociate the behavior from the individual, because this compulsion and this obsession is so powerful. It overrides every instinct within that person around self-preservation or ethical behavior, right? And they're acting in opposite to who they are, because that craving, that demand, that discomfort is so powerful that it's driving that unhealthy behavior pattern. And it's very difficult to help somebody who is in that state. You can drag them off to rehab, you can do interventions, you can talk to them, you can do all that stuff. And it's heartbreaking, because unless it's self-generated, unless there is an innate willingness within that person to address the problem and get sober or overcome the addiction or get into some form of recovery, when you compel it and impose it on them, it generally doesn't stick. So it becomes incredibly heartbreaking for so many people when you have a loved one who is suffering, because there's a powerlessness to it. Like, you can only help so much. And your role is to help them to understand that you love them and that you are available if and when they're ready to be helped, but that you cannot stand by and co-sign the behavior. And so you have to let go. And that's very scary, because you have to reflect on what happens if, something really bad happens to that person and I didn't step in and try to prevent that. There's no easy answer to that. And it's different. It's very much a case by case basis with that individual. But, standing by when someone you care about is in the throes of it is a very challenging situation. And that's the situation my parents found themselves in, dealing with me back during that time.
I think that's really helpful for somebody listening who's going through it. I think I needed somebody to tell me that, to tell me, hey, you're not actually not helping him by not engaging and allowing that behavior, but saying, I'm here for you. I love you. When you are ready, I didn't have that vernacular. When you're ready, I will pay for the rehab. I will do, I will stand by you. I will do whatever it is that you need at that point when you're ready.
Right. But I'm not available for your bullshit and
right.
lying and your manipulation.
Right. And it was too hard for me to say that, really, or I didn't have the words. So I think that's really useful. And you had one where, if I'm not wrong, you basically had a guide who kind of said, hey, I really think you should go to rehab. And he said, and you said something along the lines of, I think I can handle it without rehab. One more chance. If I relapse again, I'll go. You have my word. And the guy said, last time I heard that excuse, the guy died choking on his own vomit. Are you sure you want to risk it? And you said, yes. But you credit that guy with being with you and holding you lightly on the road to recovery. What was that scenario and what happened?
Yeah, I was seeing a therapist. My parents had had enough of me and they were done, but they said, listen, we found this therapist and I don't, it's up to you, but like, we think that it would be good if you would go and see this guy. And I agreed to do that, even though my parents were like receding into the background and really didn't want anything to do with me at this period of time. And, and this guy was in recovery himself. So he could speak my language and he was very good at being compassionate while also deploying X-ray vision and being able to see through any kind of like nonsense or bullshit that I would throw at him. And he put that challenge to me. What's I think instructive about the story that you just told is that I was convinced that I could solve this problem on my own. And the reason that I was convinced was because in every other area of my life in which I was able to become successful, it was a result of my ability to work hard, to suffer, to force the result that I wanted. In other words, this capacity to suffer equates to a tremendous capacity for self-will. It's up to me. I have control over this. I could go from not being a good swimmer to being world ranked. I could go from not being a good student to getting into Stanford. Like there's no reason why if I apply this capacity for self-will to this problem that I can't solve it. What I had to learn was that the more I applied my self-will to the problem, the deeper the hole got. And that was very confusing. Like, why can't I figure this out? Like, I am so determined to not drink and to, be sober. And then Friday night rolls around and this sense of powerlessness and, one drink. And then that leads to, a blackout and, a car accident or, all the chaos, like tons of chaos. I could not figure out why I couldn't fix this. And so when he said, look, you need to go to treatment, what he was basically saying is you need to give it up and let go and surrender and not only ask for help, but be in a position of humility to receive help. And I was like, no, I got this. And I think anybody who's a striver or achievement oriented or anybody who nobody's self-made, but, somebody who has like kind of crawled their way out of one situation to a better situation understands how powerful that call to self-will can be. And this was the first instance in my life where that capacity was failing me. And I had to get to a point where I was in so much pain that pain exceeded my fear of letting go and doing something different. And by doing something different, it meant relinquishing my need to try to control this, to say, I can't control this. I'm powerless. I need help. Please help me. And that's a very humbling thing that requires letting go, like the letting go of control over your own life, which was scary. And I think we associate words like surrender and letting go with weakness. But in truth, I think they're a pathway to incredible strength. Humility, vulnerability, openness, and honesty. These are not weaknesses. These are very powerful emotions that when channeled in the appropriate context lead to tremendous fortitude and not just strength, but ultimately a sense of self and a comfort with oneself that overcomes that sense of detachment and confusion that is the defining characteristic of what it feels like to be an addict or an alcoholic.
So you went into AA and you talked about that quite a bit. The part that I thought what might be interesting is I had never heard about inventory in particular. And I have quite a few friends who I told, who've been through AA or are in AA, I don't know the right way to say it, and are sober now, but big fans of yours. And so I asked them, what do you want to know? What would you ask Rich? And one of them said, ask him about inventory, what it is, but maybe even more than that, today. Do you think people who are not traditionally addicted could use or should use inventory in their day-to-day lives in some way? Because you still do it to this day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part and parcel of like any 12-step program are the 12 steps. And these programs are shrouded in mystery. They're anonymous for a reason.
Yeah.
But the blueprint and the tools and the steps, I think, are incredibly powerful for up-leveling your life and for self-understanding that anybody can benefit from doing. And one of the fundamental tools, which is step 4, is doing a fearless moral inventory. And the process of doing that is basically going through your life and writing down every single person, institution, that you have a resentment towards. Like who are all, go through your entire life. Who are the people you resent? And then go do a fear inventory. What are all the things you're afraid of? And then do a sexual inventory. Go through all of your relationships and sexual encounters and try to identify where you were selfish, self-seeking, and not compassionate, right? And if you're morally rigorous and completely honest in doing this, what you will discover is that patterns emerge. And those patterns reveal in an objective sense where your character defects lie. And so you will see like, oh my goodness, when I all these people that I resent, like my side of the street is that I did this. Like, how did you contribute to that resentment? And what can you, when I look at the relationships that I've had and you realize like, oh yeah, I don't know that I navigated those relationships with the utmost of, ethics, right? I was selfish here, whatever, like, you'll see patterns emerge, and then those give you some clarity on the things that you need to work on. And so I think it's a really powerful and revealing kind of bird's eye view of the things that we're blind to, because we don't have perspective on our own lives, and we need outside influence in order to kind of hold us to account. And this tool is a way of doing that for yourself. And then, of course, you do it like within the context of 12 steps, you're doing this with another human being. So there's an accountability piece. But when you work through them and then you identify all these people that you have to go and make amends to, which is not an apology. Like, you have to make it right. You have to find a way to make it right with these people. Sometimes that means you just have to move forward in your life and not do that again, because you don't want to perpetrate further harm by going to these people who don't want anything to do with you. And in other cases, like, they're simple ones, like you need to repay a debt or whatnot, but you're cleaning house, right? We're robbing ourselves of the peace and happiness that's available in the present moment by looping and ruminating on past encounters and how they're going to impact us in a future that hasn't yet occurred.
It's so true. Well, I think a lot of times when business people listen to stuff like this and they're in their sort of pain situation, the immediate thought is, well, I want to go and take the next action that I think I need to fix it, which is what you did. Like, well, I'm just not going to drink this Friday, or I'm just going to make one more phone call. But it's a beautiful idea that what if the thing that actually compounds is what I control, the things I could put in my body, the ways that I move my body, the ability I have to make amends and make things lighter for me. Maybe that's an easier place for people to stop so that their movement can be more big hands open, what's next, as opposed to sort of shrinking, protecting, etc. So I had never thought about it that way. I want to talk just slightly now about, let's call it the next sprint of your life. Mm-hmm. So, I do think that part of life and success that's real is really that the successful people have just had the ability to do two things, which is endure for a long time and iterate until they're, maybe in your words, against the right wall. Mm-hmm. And you, I read this thing about, it's 7 days on 5 separate islands. You and Jason Lester had done 12 miles of swimming, 560 miles of cycling, 131 miles of running, 703 miles in total. At first, when I heard 560 miles of cycling, I read it as crying for some reason, which probably tells you how I feel about that. But I was wondering, what does the voice inside of your head sound like when you are in that sort of chosen pain cave? Is it very different? And how do you keep going for that long?
Different from what? Different from just walking around? Voice in my head?
Yeah.
There's an honesty to it. I mean, that particular challenge we did an Ironman. We did 5 Ironmans on 5 Hawaiian islands in like 6 days. So an Ironman a day, and then flying to the next island to do it, and that was a very hard challenge. But I've spent many hours training for races like that, a lot of solitary time, and I think the kind of pain cave or low grade suffering that comes with endurance sports, and particularly ultra endurance sports, is that there is no escape from the self. And I think that this is kind of how we open the conversation. Like, that is an incredible teacher. When you have to sit with your discomfort for many, many, many hours, there's nowhere to run and there's nowhere to hide. There's a quieting of the chatter of your mind. Like, you're not looping and ruminating on the things that you might be if you were just walking around and not in that level of discomfort. And there's an honesty and a truth to it where you're confronted with the truth of who you are, your flaws, your limitations. It's a very emotional, like, a lot of emotions come up because you're kind of so fatigued and run down. And I think you meet yourself in a very honest place, and you have to grapple with that. And I think when I was going through all of that existential angst about who I was and what I wanted to do with my life, endurance sports, the training, was my way of kind of going into the cave and trying to figure out who I was. Like, I needed to leverage this capacity that I had for suffering to learn about myself and to figure out who I was. Because I'll be honest with you, Cody, like, I never asked myself what I wanted to do. I was like on a program, this is what you do. I never questioned that. So there was no self-reflection on, like, well, what do I enjoy? Like, what makes me happy? What is it that you would like to leave as a legacy for your, like, I never thought about those things. And I needed time, and I needed space, and I needed a solitary experience to really wrestle with that. So as much as, my book Finding Ultra is about all of this endurance stuff, it's really kind of this spiritual odyssey that I went on in an attempt to figure out who I was. It's like it was a journey of self-discovery, and it was a burning in the fire. Like, I had to kind of go through all of these experiences and hardships and all the financial stuff in order to, kind of burn away whoever I was and emerge on the other side of it stronger and more worthy of, the kind of work that I'm in service of today. Like, those experiences were absolutely critical and crucial. Like, I can't short circuit that. There's no shortcut to that. Like, it's part and parcel and necessary to be worthy of, like, the work that you aspire to do, I think.
Do you think that being by yourself is the best way to learn who you are, instead of, like, taking more in, asking more questions, getting advice, going to mentors? Do you learn more? And do you think more people learn more by just looking inwards?
I can only answer for myself. I think that's probably a very individual thing. I did what I needed to do. And I probably could have used some good mentors. Like, I went through many years of not really having mentors. And actually, the mentors that I had throughout my 20s and 30s were bad mentors, weren't good mentors. And so I needed to go deep within myself, I think, in order to figure a few things out. So it's not for me to say that that's how everybody else should do it. And one of the things you learn in recovery is, like, you don't give advice, you share your experience. And so I'm very reticent to ever be directly looking to camera and telling people what they should or they shouldn't do. Like, I'm not here to take your inventory or to tell you to do this and not this. Like, I'm here to share my experience.
That's really good. I could be a little bossy, so that's kind of good. It's a good reminder. I mean, I try to not be in real life. I'll always ask, like, do you want me to just listen, or do you want an opinion, or do you want ideas? But on the internet, I have found that like one of the words that people like the most is you. I thought that people could learn almost exclusively by case study or by experiential storytelling. But at least when it comes to business and money, I think a lot of people are like, I need steps through 1 through 12.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to caveat them and go, listen, these are the steps 1 through 12 that I did, or this person did, or that has worked. And you can try them, and they worked in this context, and they might not work in that context. So you're going to have to change. But I think it's actually really refreshing, and people, probably why you're followed by millions of people. You don't do that a lot. You're not like, well, you should. In fact, I don't know if I've ever heard you say those words.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable doing that. I certainly have opinions about what I think people should do, but I'm always reticent to kind of voice in that way. And I just don't think I'm constitutionally wired for that. And I'm not here to say like people shouldn't do that. It's just like, this is kind of how I do it. And I've often thought, actually, like, I think I would, if I made videos where I just looked at camera and I was, here's what you need to do. Like, here's your protocol. I'd probably like grow, there would be like, that's what people want to hear. That's what they like hearing.
Yeah.
But in my experience, life is messy. It's complicated. Everything is context dependent. And when you're talking to a broad audience and you're saying, do this, don't do this, is that helpful? And are people actually taking that and putting it into action? I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I just know for myself, like that doesn't feel right or comfortable for me with like kind of my wiring and disposition.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
especially with respect to like substances and like diet and nutrition and fitness. Like, these are all individual choices that people have to make. And it's like, here's what I did and here's what happened to me, make your inference. But I'm not here to say, don't do that, do this, do it my way.
Yeah. I couldn't really picture like rich roll, like vegan or die shirts. I can't really.
Yeah, no.
I don't think that's on brand for you. So one thing that I want to kind of like round out now. So you've shared a lot, I think, with humans that are struggling in a moment, with humans that are surrounded by people that are struggling, about how at least you course corrected, and maybe some ideas to get them thinking about their path and finding the right ladder again. You've interviewed some of the greats of our generation. Rick Rubin, who is like, I hope I almost never meet him because I like his books and his ideas too much, And Rainn Wilson, same thing. You just signed to your network, which is incredible. And for people who don't know that, that's Dwight from The Office, which I'm sure he loves that comparison. But every time I've listened to that man on a podcast, I am like blown away by the philosophical nature and how he could take something esoteric, simplify it, and also make it entertaining. Matthew McConaughey, also, maybe I hope I never meet him because I really like him.
Well, you live in Austin.
Oh, no, I know. Oh, gosh, just huge fan. But was there ever a moment in an interview with some of these greats, or maybe somebody unexpected, where something you learned on your podcast completely changed your life?
It's such a hard question to answer. And I've been asked this before, and I always struggle to answer it. For me, I've been doing this 11 years, like 800, however many episodes. And it's all like just this soup of osmosis. But when people pin me down and they're like, well, when that person said that, it's like, I don't know. My brain doesn't process it that way. I think more in terms of broader themes that recur. And I think if I could answer the question in that context, the broad takeaways that I've been able to extract from all of these amazing people that I've had the great privilege of meeting and speaking to is that doing anything well is hard. And as much as we want to look at these people and idolize them and think that they're just gifted with talent that is beyond our ability to conceptualize, that's almost never the case. That even in the most brilliant careers, like these people had hardship and worked harder than you would suspect, and they're more human than you might imagine. But beneath it, the message is always that we're all so much more capable than we allow ourselves to believe, and we're all tiptoeing and dancing on top of hidden reservoirs of potential that are just waiting to be tapped into. And I believe that every single person has the ability to tap into those reservoirs of potential and make them more manifest in their life. What that looks like for that person is very specific to that person. And there's no one way to do it. But I think in each and every case, it begins with looking inward. So as much as we want to outsource the solution and be told, here are the 5 steps, here's the protocol, in truth, life is just too messy for that. And if you want the real, honest answer, that answer already exists within you. You have to excavate it, which means you need to develop a deeper, more honest relationship with yourself. I did it through these 12 steps. There are many modalities for self-discovery, therapy, etc. But it can begin with that question, which is, what are you hiding from? Where is the change or the growth? Where does that reside? What is the growth or the change that you are most reluctant or resistant to engaging with? And I would suggest that everybody begin there. And usually that's something embarrassing or something shameful. But I think that excavation is where the juice is. That's where the gem is. And I think with respect to, you were talking about, it's hard out there right now. Like there's a lot of hardship. The obstacles that you're facing and the mountain that you're trying to climb or the difficulty that you're facing or the setback that you just endured, these things are all teachers. My wife calls them your divine moments. So rather than resent them or recoil from them, how can you engage them from a different perspective? Everything is neutral until you bring your perspective to it. So how can you shift your default attitude towards these hardships and instead approach them as opportunities, as vehicles for your growth and evolution? And I think if you can do that, then you're putting yourself in a position to reap the rewards of that self-discovery. And that's the foundation upon which you can build a more meaningful and fulfilling life. The problem is it's very esoteric. It's hard to put your hands, like, what did he just say? Like, how do I even do that? Like, I get all of that. Yeah. But honestly, like if you're trying to build something meaningful that is going to fulfill you, that's going to give you a sense that your life is being driven by purpose and is on a path towards some level of satisfaction and happiness, and ultimately, financially viable. I think that is the way to do it. And that way's hard. It's not a 5-step plan. It's not like do this, do that. But in my experience, that is the engine that has, created the thing that I get to, do and be today.
You have 4 kids?
Mm-hmm.
And you've been married for how long?
Been married 11 years. I've been with my wife since 2000. So we've been together like 23 years at this point. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Do your kids listen to the podcast?
No.
Do they listen?
They don't care.
Do they know that millions of people follow you online?
Yeah, they know. Well, it's fun now. Like, so, my oldest daughter is 20 and she's in college in Chicago. And so she'll have friends that like see my Instagram. I don't know if they listen to the podcast, but they'll see real, like occasionally. Yeah. Like that's like a thing, which is kind of hilarious.
Hysterical.
Yeah, they do and they don't, but like, you always think like, I'm going to be the cool dad, and like, it's rigged. Like, doesn't matter what you do or how cool you are, you're still lame to your kids. And it should be that way. But then I'm like, do you realize like, I'm pretty cool. Look at your friends' dads. Like, come on, right? And they're not going to give it to you.
No, my husband always says that.
Nor should they.
Yeah, he's like, we're going to be the cool parents. I mean, we are not. We are already barely cool. So you just proved it. It's just you can't be cool enough to your kids. But but do you at least feel like the lessons that you learn, you can impart on them in a different way from talking about it as much as you have and working on it as much as you have? Or you just try to do the, hey, no you shoulds to my kids either?
No, it's a little different when you're parenting. I mean, there's moments where you have to be like, this is not okay. And, we need you to be more like this. I'm a pretty soft dad. I'm not a big disciplinarian. Yeah.
Really?
I'm the feeling dad. For me, it's all about like communication. So it's less like, I'm not like, you need to do, like, I'm not like that. Like and my wife is an insane parent. Like, she's so good. And all our kids are like artists in some form or another. And have all picked like really kind of interesting pursuits. None of them are real. Yoga and stuff like that, but like not like nobody's interested in like the athletic stuff. Like,
No ultramarathon.
I'm on my own.
Nobody's
No,
arguing with you.
no,
Okay, I don't know. Honestly.
No, painter, sculptor, and then filmmaker, and then 2 musicians.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, my husband and my joke is, he always says, I think he adapted it from a comedian, so I should say that. But his adaptation of the joke is for his parents, like, thank you for giving me enough trauma to become a Navy SEAL, but not enough trauma to become a stripper.
Yeah.
And so it's from it today. It's like
good.
enough
Yeah,
trauma.
it's good. We've all had our pains and our traumas, and how can we be grateful for them instead of grinding our teeth and being resentful, and these experiences make us who we are. And so can you leverage your pain to set up a trajectory for growth and evolution, or are you just going to be a victim of it? And that's a narrative. Like, we're all a product of the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we're capable of, and what we're not capable of. But they're just stories. So what is the story that you're telling yourself, and what might be a better story? And I think if you look at your story and it's not serving you, or you keep running into dead ends, deconstruct the story and try to look at what the kind of rest stops along the way on that story are, and see if those are actually true or not, or pick other rest stops that are more in service to the person you aspire to be, and start telling that story instead. Because we are creature, like you talked about, like, oh, when you make a video or a podcast, and it's like, there's ways of teaching, like you can say, here's the list, or you can do it through storytelling. And I think human beings learn best through story. I think you can tell somebody, here are the steps, but if those steps are elucidated in the context of a powerful story, that's going to take up residence in the human mind and be a much more powerful thing. My point being that story is fundamentally perhaps one of the most powerful things about being human. And when you think about the story you tell yourself about who you are, maybe reflect a little bit on how that's producing outcomes for better or worse in your life.
Beautiful. Is that why you started Voicing Changes?
Yeah. So we started building this media company about a year ago, and we made an announcement recently. And that's really a function of understanding that as powerful as my podcast has become and as many lives as it has impacted, I'm just one voice. And because we've been doing this for a long time and have built an incredible team and understand best practices in terms of how you manage the sponsorship landscape and how you produce shows of high caliber with great production value, I wanted to be able to leverage that expertise and scale it with other voices out there that I think are incredibly valuable and deserving and worthy of amplification and support. So that's kind of the fundamental premise behind it. And it's exciting to be involved in supporting other voices, because for so long, everything I do is like my voice, which is fine. But also it's like, I want to now like take this thing and make it in service of other people. Because also at some point, like I'm going to be like, I mean, the minute I stop talking and doing like everything grinds to a halt, right? Mm-hmm. So at some point I'm going to be like, maybe I need to step back or, do something else. I want to be able to have this thing where it can last beyond like however long I decide to keep doing what I'm doing.
It's brilliant. So, I mean, I think the universe abhors a vacuum, and no shame on any of these individuals. But, when I look at some of the voices out there now that are loud, man, no wonder, kids are confused these days. And no wonder it feels kind of tough for a lot of us because, the podcasts, the top performing podcasts for women are about which dudes have you fucked lately and, or what beauty products have you put on your face and, why you shouldn't be in a relationship and all the downsides of it. And, or, do I want to go buy this next new fancy thing? And so I think it's really important what you said, which is, anybody who has a story that comes from a deeper why, not just, I want clicks and I want to be, because quickly you'll run down the rabbit hole of shame there. But that you share it. And that, I think it's really cool that there are more media companies that come from a spiritual background, not a religious background necessarily, but with something a little bit deeper. So I'm excited to see how that shakes out.
I mean, thank you. All we have is our mind.
Yeah.
And, when you reflect on the relationship between consciousness and real world events occurring across the globe, and then you think, well, if you can be in service to elevating consciousness, what is the downstream impact of that? And I think to your point, there's not enough women in podcasting. And you're right. It's crazy that, especially in the kind of self-improvement, self-help space, it's just a brosphere. Like, what is going on? Especially when you think about like the origins of this whole kind of self-improvement world and you realize like Oprah Winfrey was like the most powerful one, right?
That's true.
I'm really glad that you're doing this because I do think we need more powerful, strong female voices that are putting, great, helpful information out in the world. I think there's a real need for that right now. And the podcast world is in need of a breath of fresh air with all these bros.
Well, thank you. I'm pretty big on the fact, man, without you and Tim Ferriss, who's become, somebody that I now get to chat with and get to know, there's so much imagine, well, you're a little bit older than I am. I can't believe people share these secrets. Even when I was younger in finance, nobody was telling you how to get there. Nobody was sharing, I'm having tough situations. And so I'm really thankful to all the bros and all the dudes and everybody podcasting who's doing it from this place that they even shared. Thank God you guys were willing to throw it out there because otherwise these were conversations that are hard to have. In my family, this is not a normal thing to do to even. And talking about addiction was we basically still don't do it with the family member that has it. We might not even label it that way. And so I think it's really special. And I'm so thankful. I try to not go men versus women thing because Lord, we both got part of them in here. I needed a boy and a girl to get together to create the two of us. And simultaneously, we're a little different, And so, there's Gabrielle Lyon, who helps me a lot with some health things, because I used to think all the stuff that men did, that was the loudest, voice, health-wise, I should do the same thing. Oh yes, I should do intermittent fasting. And in fact, that's not great if you're trying to get pregnant, actually, turns out. And so anyway, I think it's cool that there's all these different voices coming together, and I'm appreciative for what you guys have done. And I'm excited for the next venture. And I think it's going to be really cool. And I'm going to make sure to subscribe. The last thing I wanted to leave us with today basically was, you now have a relationship for a really long time, a couple of kids, success, the podcast, everything. Do you think you've found happiness?
It's so interesting that you asked me that right now. I am happy that there are many barriers to my happiness that remain, and I think that I could be happier. I still fall prey to workaholism. I still delude myself that the happiness that I lack is on the other side of the next accomplishment or milestone in my career, despite all evidence to the contrary and a million guests on my podcast disabusing me of that notion. It's amazing how persistent that is in the mind. With this phase of my career, I am really intent upon doing the things that I know will drive greater happiness in my life. And those things are my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kids, and rekindling or reinvesting in my friendships that get shoved to the side because we're so busy and on deadline and too many things are happening. And I can tell you, the older you get, the phone gets heavier when the prospect of calling up that buddy that you haven't talked to in 15 or 20 years. And then investing in more experiences, basically what I'm saying is trying to cultivate greater connection with other human beings, because I like to be left alone. I'm an introvert. I want to just create in a dark room and not have anybody bother me. And I'm perfectly content until I'm not, right? And recognizing that I need those people and that I'm happier when I'm in community is inconvenient, because don't you know all these things that I have to do and how important I am? So the call to action for me is to really put that into motion. And I just got back from India, Dharamshala.
Wow.
I was invited by Arthur Brooks. So for those that don't know, Arthur Brooks used to run AEI, but is now a professor at Harvard Business School and the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where he teaches leadership and happiness and runs a lab called the Happiness Lab. And he invited, he's written amazing books, but his latest book he co-wrote with Oprah Winfrey.
No big deal.
It's about happiness. And he invited me and a small group of people to travel to Dharamshala to spend 2 days with the Dalai Lama. He's been going to see the Dalai Lama for the last 11 years. The Dalai Lama is now 89 years old. So I knew this was like, I'm trying to say no, stuff, because but this is a yes. This is like a hell yeah, like once in a lifetime opportunity. So my wife and I joined this group, and I was sitting as close as I'm sitting to you to the Dalai Lama, like 2 days in a row. And Arthur kind of hosted this series of talks and came armed with all of his questions and this journey and this arc that he wanted to take everyone on, but also understanding that no matter what he asked the Dalai Lama is going to tell you what he thinks everybody needs to hear. And the hilarious thing was that was the truth. Like, no matter what question was posed to the Dalai Lama, his answer was essentially some variation on the idea that everything goes back to love. Arthur always talks about how love is not emotion. It's a decision. And that's something he learned from the Dalai Lama. And so the happiness that you lack, the connection that you lack, the thing that eludes you or deprives you of feeling very fulfilled in your life, like all of these things will all be found by cultivating more love in your life. Giving more love is a way to receive more love. So if you are in lack, love is always the answer. And it sounds so cheesy and reductive, but it's incredibly profound. And what he said, which has stayed with me, and I have this little red bracelet on my wrist to prove it and to remind me, if you're struggling to connect with what that means for you or how to feel that sense of love, reflect on a mother's love for a child. And if that's too difficult, look at animals and look at, a mammal mother and how that mother interacts with its baby and try to embody that sensibility and share that, which I thought was a really beautiful way into thinking about and practicing love. So that's like the call to action for me, like I have a lot of work I think I still need to do around that, because I'm on the grind and I like have goals and ambitions and the like. So it was a really powerful reminder and also a way into this book that I'm in the middle of writing right now that's around change, and a means of, like, one of the things I'm struggling with is, in order to be a worthy steward of this message that I want to impart, I too have to sit in the seat of the reader or the audience and reflect on the change that I'm still too resistant to make. And do I have the courage to face that? Because it's easy to sit on my laurels and go on podcasts and talk about all these changes I've made and transformation and how I'm this expert on how to go from A to Z, when I still have a lot of work to do myself. And so committing to confronting what I'm most reluctant to change about myself, I think begins with what the Dalai Lama had to share, which is my relationship to love, to other people, and to, cultivating the relationships that are necessary in order to live a full and happy life.
Yeah, I remember once I saw Arthur speak at AEI to like a group of, even the world leaders, but they're tough and a little crotchety, and they want to talk about nuclear arms, really intense things. And Arthur comes on the stage and gives a talk on love to like the most grizzled Republican you could meet, right? And so you can imagine just the suits in the audience, and then he's kind of talking about love, and then he plays this like orchestral music with it's just glorious. And I look over, I might get kicked out of the group for this. We'll see if I'll put it on the podcast. But like, I see 10 crews with like a little speaker. And I just thought this man is really special. And
Arthur is a gift. He's such a beautiful human being and somebody I look up to tremendously and has been a mentor to me. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about him.
And one other thing is he said something, and I'm not going to remember it perfectly, so I'm not going to say it, but he talked about childlike wonder. Like, don't you sometimes, if you think about it, like think about that for a second. You just met with the Dalai Lama, like the holiest of the holies, plus Arthur Brooks, plus who else was on that trip, I'm sure. And then the other people, like, do you ever just sit and think, what the fuck's going on? Like, this is wild.
100%. I'm like, what happened to my life?
Right?
Like, I reflect back on all these moments of confusion where I couldn't see my way forward and didn't think I was going to get to the next day. And like, here I am, and this is happening. Like, this is not the product of some whiteboard, strategy session. Like, this is mystical and magical and beyond anything I could have ever imagined for myself in a way that I can't possibly make sense of. Which brings me back to like the mystical spirituality of all of it and how it begins with that deep inside work of trying to connect with your heart and what is unique about you. We're all unique individuals that came here for, in my opinion, one sole purpose, which is to learn to know who we are and to share our gifts with the world and to grow and evolve along the way.
Beautiful. Let's wrap it there. You're the man. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you guys for being here. If you haven't left a review yet for the Big Deal podcast, I want you to know you are a big deal to me. And so is every single review from you guys. This is a huge commitment from us this year. I want to try to put it all out on the field with this podcast, because if you guys get to have any sort of the feeling like I had sitting here listening to this guy being on this couch right here next to us, I think we might be able to do something special together, guys. All right. See you next week. You're a big deal.
I say that I have it, you know that I got it. No need to look all in a bag. Starting like this because I work so hard.